like to call this Tuesday, April 28th, special meeting of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board of Education to order. We will start with the pledge. Mr. Short, would you be so kind to lead us in the pledge? Ed?
I gotta get used to this. I apologize. Ready?
Yes.
Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Superintendent, if you can call roll, please.
Yes. Board Member Clark.
Here.
Board Member Short.
Here.
Board Member Reed.
Here.
Board Member Hoover.
Here.
Board Member Ranking. Board Member Ranking. We need to unmute. Board Member
Here.
Ranking.
Here.
Okay. And Student Board Member Scarlett missing.
Here.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Read a quick statement. A broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. The governor has declared a state of emergency to exist in California as a result of the threat of COVID-19. The governor issued Executive Order N-2520, which directs Californians to follow public health directives, including canceling large gatherings. The executive order also allows local legislative bodies to hold meetings via conference call while still satisfying state transparency requirements. The governor has also issued Executive Order N-3320, prohibiting people from leaving their homes or places of residence except to access necessary supplies and services or to engage in specified critical infrastructure employment. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-2920, which temporarily suspends provisions of the Brown Act relating to public meetings. As such, Folsom Cordova Unified School District board members will be conducting open session board meetings via Zoom video teleconferencing. The meetings will be also live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. The public's health and well-being are the top of the priority for the Board of Trustees of Folsom Cordova Unified School District, and you are urged to take all appropriate health safety precautions. We thank you for joining us for our Zoom board meeting, and we appreciate your patience as we learn to work in this new environment. With that being said, adoption of agenda.
I'll move it.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Short, second by Ms. Ranking. Superintendent, call roll, please.
Board Member Clark.
Here.
Board Member Short.
Yay.
Board Member Reed.
Aye.
Board Member Hoover.
Aye.
Board Member Ranking.
Aye.
Student Board Member missing.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go into item number 4, public participation. Time will be given to speakers at the discretion of the board chairperson. This law allows public to address the board on any matter not on the agenda, but the law prohibits action by the board on non-agenda items. Are there any public participation comments?
We do have some comments that were written in using our Google form for this portion, and I can read those out loud now. No name was given for the first comment. Does FCUSD have any measures in place in case the schools cannot open in the fall of 2020? What does the school district plan to do for the students and teachers? Second comment was submitted by Jenny Nikakis. Will the school be able to open in August and follow any state-approved social distancing rules? Oh, I apologize. That was not Jenny Nikakis. That was, no name was given for that comment. The third comment was submitted by Jenny Nikakis. In light of all of the changes that have taken place due to Corona, I would like to urge the board to not go forward with the AMP model of kindergarten. Now more than ever, it doesn't make sense to crowd so many little bodies into a small space. Just imagine all the germs that are spread. Kids at that age especially are not the best at washing their hands, covering their cough, sneeze, keeping their hands out of their nose, mouth. You get the idea, I'm sure. We would also not have enough time to sanitize the classroom before the next round of students comes in. I believe there is about a 3-minute window. Would you want to be in that classroom? And then the fourth written public comment for this portion of the agenda was submitted with no name attached. Please don't shorten the school year. It took a while to get distance learning going because the district wanted to get it right and ensure access for everyone. Now that the work has been put into it, let's help our kids continue to learn. In addition to the benefit of continued learning, schooling at home gives them good structure to their days, a positive feeling of productivity, and a valuable opportunity to interact online with teachers and classmates. Cutting this off early would be a disservice to them and to the efforts everyone has put in to put the distance learning system in place. Additionally, if we end school early while we still have stay-in-place orders in our county, students will have more free time on their hands and will be more likely to congregate with other students in public places. And that's all we have for the written comments.
Thank you, Angela. With that being said, we will actually close this open hearing and open our public hearing. Item 5, public hearing pursuant to Election Code Section 10010. The public is invited to provide input regarding the composition of districts the district intends to establish for board member elections before drawing a draft map or maps of the proposed boundaries of the district. Superintendent Collegian?
Yes, this is the fourth of our 6 hearings that the board has scheduled on our calendar. And this is a chance to hear about the composition of the, getting public input on the composition of districts. So we invite Dr. Justin Levitt from National Demographic Corporation to share his presentation with us this evening.
Well, good evening, and thank you to all of you who are here tonight to hear about this very important issue. I just want to start by checking to make sure that you guys can hear me. Okay, great. I see some nods. So thank you very much for having me tonight. And I wish we could be there in person to talk about this instead of doing this electronically. So I want to kind of, first of all, explain what is exactly the district is looking at doing and what exactly will change as a result of this move to district elections. And I want to start by emphasizing that this does not change attendance areas or the school year. It doesn't change where your child will go to school. It only changes, it only looks at changing the method of election of the board of the school board, board of trustees, from an at-large system where all voters across the district vote for all 5 members of the board to a by-district or trustee area system where the district will be divided into 5 equally sized trustee areas, and each trustee area will elect 1 representative to the board. Again, nothing will change in terms of boundaries, attendance areas, size of the district, shape of the district. This is only for the purposes of electing a board of trustees. This is the 4th public hearing. This is kind of still in the early stages of the process. We have not released any draft maps at this point. We are only at the point of taking public comment and feedback as to which principles and criteria we need to consider when we draw trustee areas. And to give you an overview, especially, maybe the last time you heard about this was 10 years ago when the state was doing its redistricting in 2011, I want to kind of go through some of the basic requirements for drawing trustee areas. The first major requirement, and this is on that left-hand column, federal laws, is equal population. Trustee areas have to have approximately the same number of people. This is using the latest census data. So in fact, we're still using the 2010 census data for this particular process. Next year, when we get 2020 census data, we will actually have to look at the trustee areas and make adjustments to incorporate that new growth. In addition, we have to follow the requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act. The Federal Voting Rights Act speaks to protected class populations, groups that have historically faced barriers or discrimination to registration, voting, or obtaining materials in their language. The courts have said race cannot be the only factor or even the predominant factor, but it can be one factor that we consider alongside many others, such as the principles in the right-hand column, traditional districting principles. So it's something we have to take into, or we should look at taking into account and have discussions about, but it should not be the only factor, can't be the only factor that we consider. Now on that right-hand column, traditional districting principles, these are criteria that courts have recognized as being valid principles for drawing trustee areas. Communities of interest are essentially your neighborhoods. I'll talk a little bit more about them on the next slides in more detail, but we want to think about areas with shared communities, shared problems, areas that need to stay together in terms of having good representation on the board. Compactness and contiguity are both concerning the shape of the district. Is it easy for people to understand or recognize which trustee area they're in? Is it possible to get from one part of a trustee area to every other part of that trustee area without leaving the trustee area? Do we avoid bypassing other populations within the district in order to create a trustee area? And all of this really, even including these sort of visible and natural and man-made boundaries, which refer to your major roads and streets, your subdivision boundaries, as well as natural features such as canals, lakes, and even ridgelines. These all really are getting at making it understandable for people to know which trustee area they reside in. And so what we want at the end of the day are trustee areas that people understand. Finally, respecting voters' wishes, continuity in office is the principle that the voters of this district have elected a board, and that a districting process should not be targeted at a specific board member. We also, notice the last one, planned future growth is in gray. We are not considering future growth. We're not considering growth in the last 10 years. Next year we'll have an opportunity to consider how things have changed and where things might be going from 2020 to 2030. But for now, we're using the 2010 data because that's the best available data. Just to give you a sense of what this all translates into, the district had a population of 115,536 in the 2010 census. To create, and this actually, by the way, I should mention, excludes the prison population. State law in the last 10 years has asked us to exclude the prison population when making these changes. And this way we don't have a district that's overrepresenting an area where we don't have a lot of parents or people with children in the school system. Each of the 5 trustee areas then basically takes that 115,000, divides it by 5, and each area should be about 23,100 residents. They actually recognize you may not be able to get it perfectly equal. There's sort of a slight margin on either direction, but we're aiming for each trustee area to have approximately 23,100 residents. Now, part of our voting rights analysis looks at where people of different racial or protected, racial, ethnic, and other protected class groups live. If we look at the Latino population, we don't, the areas in purple and blue are under 35% Latino, and you can see that that's very much the majority of the district. The areas in red or orange are over 75% Latino, and you see that there's some very small areas that actually have very few people in them. There's actually 2 people in one of these census blocks and 4 in the other. So there aren't any concentrations, we would say, of Latino population in this particular numerical map. Although this, of course, doesn't take the place of recognizing where communities exist, even if they're not showing on this in this map. The same is true of the African American community. While about 14% of the total population, about 6% of the total population is African American, we see slightly higher numbers in Rancho Cordova than in Folsom, but not many neighborhoods higher than 35% African American. And those tend to be concentrated along US 50 at the eastern end or western end of the district in Rancho Cordova. With regards to the Asian American population, we do see some higher Asian American populations on the eastern end of Folsom, as well as the southern portion of Rancho Cordova, kind of between the Mather Air Force Base site and US 50. So this is a community that we may want to look at in terms of drawing district boundaries. Now, how do we actually define communities of interest? Because that's what these hearings are really about at this point, trying to get a sense of what the communities of interest are. Well, there are really two questions we're asking here. And the first is, what are your shared interests, your shared characteristics, problems, issues? Things like that, especially for the purposes of a school board, really serve to unite or bring together different communities, such as attendance areas. We've heard a lot already about the cities that make up the district, but also natural dividing lines, such as the major roads or ways people get from home to school, other landmarks that are related to the school sites, for example, parks, other legislative and election concerns, like how this overlaps with other district boundaries. We're also want to ask a second question. We can identify a community of interest, but does it want to be united together in one district, or does it want to have a voice in multiple districts? And so sometimes we often hear in most school districts, we hear with attendance areas that while it makes sense perhaps to keep some attendance areas together, there may be communities that want to be divided or want to make sure that their parents feel that they can contact 2 board members rather than just 1. And this varies from community to community. So we want to ask both of these questions. Here are the attendance areas. Oftentimes we hear about the elementary school attendance areas in particular. That's where a lot of parents and residents have the most emphasis or focus. One thing I'll mention is that these attendance areas, particularly within Folsom, don't follow census block boundaries. In fact, some of the census blocks in Folsom are quite large, simply because of the way the city is built out. And so that's going to be something I think we look at, especially as we look at drawing maps. So just to show you a couple of different real world proposals, Glendora Unified and Glendale Unified illustrate what more compact maps look like. High school clusters in Glendale, very kind of rectangular districts to the extent possible in Glendora. On the other hand, some districts have chosen to create less compact maps that achieve other goals. Central Unified, for example, wanted to ensure that each trustee area had some suburban population as well as some rural population. And so they drew lines out from the suburbs into the rural community. These are all different options chosen by different districts, and our job here is to figure out, is to help you as a district figure out which option is right for your community. And so with that, I look forward to hearing your feedback tonight, answering any questions. And next time we see you, we will have some maps to discuss. And so we'll actually get some lines on paper and see what can be drawn. So thank you very much for having me tonight, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
All right, thank you so much. We'll take it out to the public. Are there any public comments?
Hi, we're going to read a public comment. This was submitted last week by a member of the public after last week's board meeting was closed. But since the subject continues, we will read the comment at this time. This was submitted by, oh, excuse me, my screen just changed. David Bala Hawkins. I'm astonished that there is a hesitation to make the FCUSD board more representative of the community. Such a position devalues communities that already feel disempowered, even more so with the horrendous financial and family impacts of COVID-19. This board has an opportunity to demonstrate the value you place on the educational opportunities of all students. Your actions will demonstrate the degree that you value equity and fairness. Please do not be afraid to interact with and learn from your community. Such fear will only strengthen the isolation that already exists. And that's the only written comment we have.
Okay. Well, that was easy. Any comments from the board? Mr. Short?
Yes, you mentioned earlier we're not considering the growth. Is there, because we do have some growth that we are aware of by just building permits in our facilities, fee study that we just adopted last week. Can you answer why we're not considering it, at least up to 10%? Even Mr. Rafferty said no more than 10%. So why are we
Sure. Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. And it kind of gets into some of the legal, challenges with districting. The courts have said that if you want to look at growth that has already happened, including in the time in between the last census and the drawing of districts, you actually have to do a special census, which could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get precise information. And so, basically the courts have said, if the data is potentially available, you have to get it. And that means that when this happens, and other districts have run into this, that they've had big projects in between the census and transition to districting. If they want to include that, that means you have to run a special count or special census.
Yeah, that's costly, and so it behooves us to wait until the next census. Is that correct? That's what you're
exactly. You can actually speculate once you have districts in place, trustee areas in place. In 2021, you can speculate on what might happen until 2030 because that's basically a guess. But if you're looking backwards at growth that's already happened, the courts have said you have to look at it this way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Short. Any other board comments?
Mr. Clark, can you
Ms.
hear me?
Ranking.
Thank you. In the past, when we looked at this, and we did look at this a number of years ago, I think the assumption was the breakup would be 2 representatives from Folsom, 2 representatives from Rancho Cordova, and an overlapping position, an overlapping area of Folsom and Rancho Cordova. I know that there is some concern that the boundaries be drawn so that there is opportunity to keep the board balanced between Rancho Cordova and Folsom, if that makes sense. And I made comment to the effect that I'd love to see at least 1, if not 2 areas or more that had overlap in Folsom and Rancho Cordova, but I realized that that takes away from the compact districts that seem to be of interest to some other board members. So I'm just concerned about the opportunity to create opportunity for representatives from both sides of the city, of the district, if that makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Ranking. Any other board comments? Take it back out to the public. Any new public comments? And back to the board, hearing none, we will actually close this public hearing and we will open our open session.
Sorry, Chris. We just got a public comment on the Google Doc. Angela, can you see that? From Kathy Hatcher.
All right, we'll allow it.
Okay, I am in the doc now. And Kelly, which number is it?
Number 18.
Chris, can you formally reopen the hearing then to receive?
We will reopen the public hearing, allow that public comment.
Okay, I've got this. From Kathy Hatcher. Just a thought, we have 4 middle school boundaries and 5 board members. Perhaps one board member could represent each middle school boundary and one member can be at large. As a new middle school is built, the one at-large member could become affiliated with that new school's boundaries.
All right. Back to the board. Any additional comments? And with that, we will close our public hearing. Back to our open session. Item 6, discussion action item. Approved memorandum of understanding between Folsom Cordova Unified School District and Folsom Cordova Education Association, FCEA, addressing the impacts and effects of COVID-19. Superintendent?
Yes, good evening. Since we have been closed, our schools have been closed since March 13th, we have been working with our bargaining unit, our Folsom Cordova Education Association, and bargaining the impacts and effects of the school closures due to COVID on our certificated employees. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our FCEA team, our negotiating team, the management team that have spent hours in looking at how to respond to the conditions during school closures. I also want to thank our teachers for responding so positively and passionately to educating our students through distance learning. They've done an amazing job. And with that, we have an MOU that covers the initial impacts, and we have an addendum to the MOU that goes into more detail on some of the specifics on grading, special education, leaves, and attendance. And that's what the board has before them this evening. But I am going to ask Mr. Ogden, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, to give a little bit more specifics and share a little bit more about the process. Mr. Ogden.
Hello, board members. Hello, Dr. Clegian. Before you, there are 2 MOUs. Well, there's actually an MOU and an addendum, as Dr. Clegian stated. The first MOU was signed March 25th. And in this MOU, it describes our rollout of distance learning. It describes the work day of a teacher as far as their virtual office hours. It also gives specifics on responding to parents, either by phone or email. It talks about, we won't ask teachers to do something outside of their regular job duties. It ensures that they will have the compensation and benefits. Nothing would be reduced as a result of that for this school year. And that included coaching stipends and other stipends that were paid in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement. We also discussed and created an MOU about how our evaluation process would go. We talked a little bit in this initial one about summative assessments and grading. However, we wanted to circle back on that, and so that's the addendum. So it's not specific in this one on number 6. We also made the staff aware that we would have trainings available. We also let them know that we would not require staff to use personal consumable resources if they are working remotely. And we discussed the need for doing IEP meetings and how our IEP teams would come together. We have more specificity in the addendum on some working conditions for our special education teachers. We also talked in this MOU and agreed on how we were going to do evaluations. If we have a staff member who their evaluation is completed, their observations are completed, and they require only a meeting, or they've already had that final meeting with their supervisor, and that evaluation would be complete. If we weren't able to complete an evaluation, those would be carried over to 2021. And our 2021 evaluation year, folks, we would push those back a year and make those evaluations on the 21-22 school year calendar. Further, we talked about and when we wrote this at a time when we weren't sure when we were coming back. So we did have language in here saying that when we come back, school sites will be adequately sanitized before members return. And then we also specified that members would not need to make up adjunct duty or committee assignments that were missed during the school closure. So that is the first MOU, and if the board desires, they could vote on this one first because this one has been implemented, and this is how we are operating right now. So we could do this one. The second one has some items that we have not implemented yet. So if you wanted to split these as two voting items, I think that's acceptable, or you could do them together. I guess that's the will of the board.
It would be my preference to do them together since they're designed to be read together.
I would prefer it separate.
I'd second doing them together.
Ms. Ranking?
Separate.
I am actually thinking that it might be better if we look at them separate. I'd like to look at the addendums added on to the other ones. So let's go with separate, please.
Did you look at one document?
The separate ones?
Separate.
Vote on them
We'll do it separate. Yeah.
Okay.
I could make a motion to move the MOU COVID-19 signed on March 25th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Can we have discussion on that?
Mr. Reed?
I don't feel comfortable voting on that motion until a decision has been made on the addendum. I would prefer that we do the addendum first, and then I will be able to feel comfortable to vote on the main motion or the main MOU. But I will not be able to vote on the MOU until that addendum is discussed first.
We have a first and second to go on the first, President.
Comment, Mr. Short? I didn't hear it.
We have a first and a second to move the first MOU that we're using today.
I'll honor that first by...
Yeah, we're doing it today, so it's
yes.
kind of...
Yeah.
Well, actually, Josh had seconded my request to do it together, though.
Was a motion made on that? I think the first motion we had was to vote on the one that was signed on the 25th. Am I correct on that?
I heard Josh second my desire to move forward with them together.
Was that a motion? I don't believe that was a motion.
Mr. President, I think we could compromise here, and would it be possible, and I don't know if we can ask the superintendent to hear them separately, but you do the addendum first. Would that be possible?
I would say we vote for the first one first because it's already being done. And if you want to consider the first one, if this is Robert Rules of Order, if you want to do the first one, we can vote on it, and then we can go back to this, another motion. You can take that motion off the table, and then we move on to another motion. It's not a discussion.
Well, that's the motion on the addendum, correct?
Right. So
just so I'm clear on that,
this motion we can vote on it, and then if it fails, then we can make the second motion on voting to go for the first one. That's how you would do it in Robert Rules of Order.
And my initial and I suppose I should have said I move, but correct. I intended mine to be a motion which Josh seconded. So I believe that we need to vote on that one first under Robert's Rules of Order before we get to the second motion.
Yeah.
Mr. Short?
That's why I say you vote on that, and if it fails, then we proceed with another motion.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Ranking, did you have a question, comment?
No.
Okay.
Back to Mr. Reed's motion.
Mr.
All right.
Mr. Clark, just for clarification, can we get Mr. Reed to redo the motion so it's clear on what I'm putting in the minutes?
Mr. Reed, please redo the motion.
Yeah, the motion was to consider the MOU and its addendum together rather than separate.
I'll entertain a second.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mr. Reed, second by Mr. Hoover. Superintendent, call roll.
Yes. Board Member Clark,
No.
Board Member Short,
No.
Board Member Reed,
Yes.
Board Member Hoover,
Aye.
Board Member Ranking,
No.
Student Board Member Nisnik.
Yes.
Okay, now I'll make a motion to move the first amendment that we're doing today to vote on that now.
I'll second.
Moved by
I'm sorry.
Mr. Short.
Can you clarify that, please? Which?
The FCE MOU COVID-19 signed on March 25th, 2000. Vote on that now. My motion is to vote on that separately now.
With respect, I think we all want to vote on that. Would it? Is there anyone that would be interested in taking these in a different order but still separately?
Oh, I have a motion on the table.
There is a motion on the table for the March 25th.
We need a second.
MOU.
I'll second it.
All right. Moved by Mr. Short, second by Ms. Ranking. Superintendent?
Yes. Board Member Clark,
Aye.
What about public comment?
We got a motion on the table. We just vote. If you want to do comment, that's fine.
There is a comment that's open to you, Mr. Reed. But please keep in mind that there is a motion on the table.
shall I
Super-
continue?
Yes.
Okay. Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Short,
Aye.
Board Member Reed,
No.
Board Member Hoover,
I'm still unclear on the process here. Are we voting on the actual MOU? Don't we need to open that up for public comment?
We're
Or
voting
the-
on the,
Go ahead.
just to clarify, we're voting on the one from March 25th that everything in it has been implemented.
Yes.
And don't we need public
I
comment since?
understand that. I'm just confused on the process here. Why we normally would open that up for public comment. So I'm just
Is there-
confused why we're voting already.
MOU?
Well, that was the MOU from the 25th, about a month ago. I don't believe that it was open for public comment. I will refer to the superintendent for further clarification.
So as Mr. Ogden was explaining the two phases of our MOUs, the original MOU that we started with was dated March 25th, 20. It was to identify the working conditions that would be modified during the initial school closures and defining some of the parameters of distance learning. We knew that some of the items such as grading and attendance and special education needed further clarification, but we didn't have all the information on March 25th.
Correct.
And that's why we have the separate MOU addendum. And I think as Mr. Ogden said, the board can choose to vote on it all together, the March 25th MOU along with the April 24th addendum, or you can vote for them separately. And that's what I think we're deciding at this point in time with a motion on the table now to vote on the March 25th original MOU with the conditions that have already been implemented, voting on that first and then getting into the addendum next.
And it also would protects us if the next MOU doesn't pass. We've got to at least pass the one from the 25th.
Correct. The motion still sits on the table. I will actually, before we vote, I will actually take it out to the public. Is there any public comment? Any board comments?
Yeah, Mr. Clark, I'm still, I guess, am asking for clarification. By taking this vote, will we be approving the MOU from the 25th, or are we approving moving forward, separating the two for purposes of approval?
We're moving to approve.
Yes.
We're moving to
The
approve.
25th.
All right, then I have some questions then, if that's what this is.
Sure.
We got to vote still.
Yeah, we still have to vote. Motion's still on the table, but I will open it up for board comments.
Right, yeah, because because you have to allow the board to comment before we
Of
vote.
course.
All right, so I guess I'm a little confused. At the last school board meeting, this MOU, correct me if I'm wrong, was presented to us as unsigned in closed session. So
March
how did it
25th,
become
the-
signed on March 25th if on April 23rd, it was not, or whenever our last board meeting was, it was not signed?
I think there might.
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Yes.
The March 25th MOU was signed. The April 24th one was not signed. The April 24th is an addendum to the March 25th. The March 25th did not have specificity on things like grading, special ed, and a couple other items. And so we had signed the 25th. It just had not been brought to the board for ratification yet.
And I guess I would also like to understand better what paragraph 6, if you could indicate what paragraph 6 means as it relates to grading.
Sure. At that time, in early March, we were looking at summative assessments, and we were getting feedback on what kind of summative assessments were going to be required and what grading was going to happen. So what were teachers going to be expected to do? At that time, we did not have a lot of clarity, and there was a common understanding that we would circle back and address grading at a later time. So at this point, we said teachers would not be required to do summative assessments or grading at that time.
So what would that mean if only this MOU were approved and not the addendum?
Well, I think it would mean one of two things, that we would not have grading, or it would mean we would fall back on board policy 5121, which directs teachers how to do the grading.
So there could be grading if this gets adopted based on board policy then.
Correct.
I guess, I remain confused as to this being included in the MOU, in that both the board and the schools were informed at around the same time about the discussion about having students be able to have the grade that they left school on March 13th, with the opportunity to improve that grade, but not diminish that grade. And that same understanding that was shared with the board as well as the principals were shared fairly widely with the school community in early April, close to a month ago. So how does those two events happen at the same time?
You bring up a good point. The timeline, we wrote this MOU in mid-March. We signed it on the 25th, but we were working on it for a week. The guidance that came out from the state came out, I believe, April 9th. It came out in April. So we wrote this prior to that guidance, and we were waiting for that guidance at that time.
And yet it was April 3rd that one of our high school principals communicated to 2,400 students and their parents, indicating that this is what we were going to do, allow them to have a grade. So that's 6 days before the state of California came out and made that as an option. And it was also the board's understanding prior to the April 3rd announcement by one of the high school principals that that's what we were going to do. And yet item number 6 would suggest perhaps otherwise. Doesn't align.
Well, this was being talked about before we had guidance from the county or the state on how we were going to proceed with grades. And that's why we were going to circle back on this with an addendum. That was a common understanding with management and the bargaining unit at that time.
And this is not unlike what other districts around us have done too. Many of them, their teachers union and management work together to adopt an initial MOU because teaching in a distance learning environment is something as a whole school district we've not done before. So we got the guidance from our county office of ed to move forward with MOUs that would at least get the ball rolling, knowing, and we question, when are we going to receive guidance from the state on some of these specifics, whether it was special education, grading, and so forth. So that information came in early April, and our district, as well as neighboring districts, have since added on with an addendum to their MOUs to add the specificity, just as we are doing in our addendum.
Any other questions from the board? I do see a couple of hands raised from the public. Angela, did you notice those?
Hi, Chris. I believe that Martha is moderating the raised hands, and I will be reading out the written public comments.
Okay. Are there any public comments?
There are public comments related to the addendum, and at your direction, I will read public comments. Just give me the signal as to when I should read those at the proper time, please.
Okay. Well, we're looking at those right now.
Chris, I do have a quick question.
Sure.
I think I'm comfortable supporting this MOU, but I do want to clarify David's question that, if the addendum doesn't pass, then where are we at with grading? I guess is the question. I'm assuming the status quo, that this is referring to something different, but I just want to clarify that.
Mr. Ogden, can you clarify that, please?
If the addendum does not pass, then we are back in negotiation with a bargaining unit.
Thank you.
All right.
Excuse me, this is Angela. We do have a public comment that has just come in regarding the MOU that's being discussed right now, and I can read that.
Yes.
This was submitted with no name attached. With the MOU, how was the 2 hours that teachers are required to have available each day agreed upon? Teachers should be required to either have virtual meetings or recorded videos to give direct instructions to students during this time to give more normalcy for the students. Students need the direct instruction to be successful, and teachers should be required to support students even during distance learning. Distance learning requires teachers to support and guide students, not just have office hours. Elementary and middle school students don't know what office hours are or how to use them. Teachers need to be required to instruct their students.
Mr. Clark, we have 2 raised hands at the moment.
All right.
I will start with the first, Donna Brown.
Ms. Brown.
Hi, Chris.
Oh.
Or can you hear me?
Yes, we can, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just want to understand something. You guys are wanting now to give grades? Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
That motion is not on the table.
Okay.
Mr. Ogden, can you clarify, please?
When we wrote this MOU, our intention was to come back after we got more guidance from the county and the state and to determine what we were going to do for grades. At this time, we were really focused on how we were going to roll out distance learning, the impacts and effects on teachers, ensure our teachers at that time, when no one knew what the future held for us, that they were going to have jobs for the rest of the year. They were going to get paid for the rest of the year. How the last couple months of the year would work. We did know we had to get specific on grades, and at that time we didn't write specific language with an intention to come back together and work on it, and that we did. We had ad hoc committees, multiple meetings, brought in lots of different teachers and management to discuss it. And that resulted in the addendum that we signed on April 24th with the bargaining unit.
All right.
And next, Mr. Clark, is Rashimi Akara, and I'm really sorry if I didn't say your name correctly.
We're listening.
A question regarding the grading. Since we're talking that we won't have any grades for the third trimester, does that mean that we won't have the grades for the entire third trimester? Because we did have like 10 days of school and kids did get grades. So is it that the entire third trimester will not be counted for the grades on the report card?
Next, Mr. Clark, is Amanda Turkey.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Clark. I am not sure if I should speak now or later. I specifically wanted to address the addendum to the MOU that was signed on April 24th. Should I hold comment or should I go for it?
You know, I actually.
I'm sorry, Mr. Clark, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I don't actually have a problem with that. I will leave it up to the board to get there.
Excuse me, Mr. Clark. I think we need to address the motion and make sure the people who are making public comment are speaking to that item. Because if we start getting into the grading policy,
that'll create a problem.
I will reserve.
Okay. Yes, let's reserve that comment. Let's. Any other comments on the present motion that we're making from the board?
Yeah, just to confirm what Mr. Ogden said earlier, that if this MOU is adopted and the addendum is not adopted, then school grading continues based on the existing board policy. That to differentiate from existing board policy on grading, we will need to have the addendum adopted. Is that correct?
Mr. Ogden, just for clarification, please.
We always have an opportunity to meet again with the bargaining team, work on a different addendum if this addendum doesn't meet the needs of our community. So that short of a MOU that's agreed upon by management and the bargaining team and ratified by the board, we would fall back on board policy.
Which is grading.
Yes, another thing just to think about, when we wrote this original MOU, we did not know we were going to be out for the balance of the year.
Correct.
We actually were thinking we were going to be coming back. So as we look back on these dates and the time frame, so many things are changing so quickly. Grading was one of those things that we didn't want to lock into because we weren't sure how long we were going to be out, how many days of school the students were going to miss, how we were going to do distance learning, because we had not done distance learning for 20,000 students. So there were a lot of unknowns when we wrote this, and we tried to leave a little grace for ourselves to come back and work together, management and the bargaining unit, on how we would do grades in a way that we felt would best support our kids.
Okay.
Mr. Ogden, does it also mean that if this if the addendum is not adopted, the board can give direction to renegotiate with FCEA, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
One comment, Mr. President.
Mr. Hoover.
I just wanted to comment on the public comment regarding kind of normalcy and scheduling. I know that it's not in the MOU. However, I did ask for an update on this a couple weeks ago, I think now. And yeah, I would love to hear where that's at some point in the future in terms of how our sites are figuring out ways to better coordinate classes and things like that.
We're planning to have an update as an information item on the May 7th agenda. That will be one of the topics.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? All right, I will entertain that previous motion. Mr. Short, can you repeat that motion, please?
Yeah, to move the FCA MOU COVID-19 signed March 25th, 2000, memorandum of understanding that's already been implemented.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Short, second by Ms. Ranking. Superintendent?
Board Member Clark?
Okay.
Board Member Short?
Yes.
Board Member Reed?
I'd like to explain my vote. I vote yes, based on Mr. Ogden's clarification that existing grading under the current grading policy adopted by the board remains in place until an addendum is adopted that would change it to something else. So I vote yes based on that.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Ms. Ranking?
Yes.
And Student Board Member Nisnik?
Hi.
Thank you.
All right. That motion carries. Now we will go on to the addendum, and I would imagine that we have several folks that are willing to make comments.
Yes, I have a few raised hands. Did you want to start with that, Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Okay, Amanda, I'm going to mute you.
Thank you. Thank you, board, for listening. I am Amanda Turkey, and I have several roles in the district. I am the district librarian, actively working in Cordova High School, at Mitchell Middle School, and also at Williamson Elementary School. I am also an equity leader. And for those who are watching who may not know, the equity team was formed by the district in response to our standing as significantly disproportionate by the state of California. So basically, this means that we are a district who is already found to be underserving marginalized students. And this equity team was formed so that we could better understand the inequities in our district and hopefully to build a path towards resolution, creating a school district that cares about and meets the needs of all of our students, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, primary language, or intellectual ability. I am speaking tonight on behalf of all 20 of the equity leaders. We have been frantically galvanizing over the last few days to appeal the current and blatant inequities present in the proposed grading practices of Section 1D and the addendum to the MOU put forth by FCUSD and FCEA. I am also here to speak on behalf of those parents and students who are not able to speak for themselves tonight for numerous reasons due to lack of technology, perhaps a language barrier, or perhaps they did not know that the board meeting was happening on a Tuesday night instead of a Thursday night. We, the equity leader team, reject the current addendum to the MOU being put forth by FCUSD and FCEA regarding school closures related to the COVID-19 pandemic distance learning plan. And we ask the board to request that FCUSD and FCEA return to the bargaining table to draft a more equitable grading policy. The grading practices that are proposed in the current addendum to the MOU will significantly impact our students of color, our second language learners, our students with disabilities, and those who are of low socioeconomic status by putting them at even further disadvantage. This situation should not be confused with wanting to further disadvantage our marginalized students by reducing academic expectations or rigor. Even though the district is offering the perception of choice in grades to students, a student's ability to be successful during this time isn't always in their control, nor is it in ours, but it's a result of certain privileges that they have been afforded during this time. For many, receiving a grade of CR is not a choice, it is a necessity. There could be a million reasons why a student might take a credit. This can include that the district technology that they have doesn't work. The hotspot is ineffective. They're working for their small family businesses. They're caring for other family members. Their parents are essential workers on the front lines going to work every day. Bottom line is that we cannot control all of the reasons that kids might struggle at home during a global pandemic. Letter grades only reflect a measure of privilege, not standards, mastery, or learning at this time. What we can control.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to probably cut you off. I am going to stick to the 3-minute mark on that, on public comment. I do understand that we do have quite a few that are wanting to speak. So I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds to wrap that up.
So what we can control is how we protect all of our kids. Again, please reject the current addendum to the MOU being put forth and ask that it be renegotiated for a more equitable grading policy.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Tony.
Hi, everybody. Tony Ruiz from Vista Del Lago. First of all, I don't want to hear anybody mention Robert's Rules again because I just heard like 5 different violations of Robert's Rules. So let's just ignore that. Please pay attention to what these experts on our equity team, what our leaders and partners from Challenge Success have to say, what our teachers who are the experts in this field. Please pay attention to what they have to say, because what they have to say is based on research, it's based on pedagogy, it's not based on I feel this or I worry about this, it's based on the research. And quite frankly, with all due respect, I think certain members of the board should recuse themselves because this directly impacts certain board members' children, which I don't believe is appropriate. So I will yield the balance of my time, and I just encourage you to listen to what the researchers, the experts, and your teachers, who are the subject matter experts and are the experts in the classroom, please listen to what they're saying. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ruiz, for your comments. The next speaker.
Next is Julie Blake.
Ms. Blake.
Good evening, esteemed members of the board and Dr. Koligian. My name is Julie Blake, and I am currently a Folsom Cordova lead teacher. But tonight I'm coming to you as a parent who is guiding my own 4 children through distance learning. I have 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 in elementary school in the San Juan Unified School District that is currently using credit, no credit, or a petition for grade. So I have a unique perspective on this choice for grading and equity. When we talk about equity, I think people forget that it's not only about socioeconomics or race. While the scenario of offering students a choice of credit or grades seems at the surface to offer equity, in reality, it does the opposite. My junior who is applying to universities is an honors student with A's and B's. He's currently taking his 4th year of Spanish and AP statistics from home. Recently, he received an F on a midterm because he missed the deadline. This is the same kid who got an A in honors chemistry the year before because he went to school before school, during lunch, and after school to receive help from his teacher in person. Why did he miss this deadline? The deadline fell on the day after we had a family member die to COVID-19. My uncle was 59. We were told by his doctors that he was recovering, and he suddenly took a turn for the worse. While grieving, we fought for an exception, and we were met with a hard no. Due to that F, he has had to opt for credit in that class, which will sit next to his other A's and B's on his transcript. It makes one wonder, why would a student have credits and A's on one transcript? At the same time, he is being measured against students in the same class as another student with an A. This inequity is causing my child harmful grading practices. This choice of credit or grades makes it confusing to future universities. My other son is a freshman who has an IEP for dyslexia and ADHD, and also maintains A's and B's while in school. Since we have shifted to distance learning, he now has suffering grades, and it's affecting him greatly. All his supports have been taken away. Support teachers, the ability to attend a flex class, the ability to come before or after school. How is this equitable? He is not trying hard enough, is he not? Our current reality does not allow educators to grade students on an even field. If we grade, We are grading on each individual circumstance at home, not on their learning, mastery, or ability. With all that I am doing as an educator and parent to help support my children with their grades, we have to consider parents that are essential workers, may have lost their jobs or even their homes as a result, have sickness or death in the family, a student with mental health or social emotional needs. These kids with these types of challenges live all over our district. I beg you to do the right thing for our students, our community, and our teachers. We need to look at our grading practices and do what's right for our students. We need to go credit, no mark. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Next is, I'm sorry, Mr. Clark. Next is Donna Brown.
Good evening, Ms. Brown.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't have a speech prepared, but I can tell you that my son, who was the only kid to get a scholarship from Cordova High School for a sport, if you guys go to grading, he's gonna fail. He's not gonna get it. He won't get his scholarship. When he had, if you don't live here, you don't know what it's like. I work every single day. My daughter right now is in an anxiety clinic. Okay, this is hard on our kids. And for anyone to not even try to think about how hard he had to work, even if it was he only made C's. I blame the school for that because he came out of the GATE program. But once they get older, they just stop caring about our kids. Oh, it's your responsibility. Yes, and when you talk to me, I try my hardest to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. I'm shaking, thinking all the arguments and everything we went through to make him take every class A through G. Well, my friends aren't. Well, your friends aren't graduating either, boy. You can graduate. You have a chance to do something. And if you guys decide to take this away from my son or our family, he'll be on the streets with the rest of the boys. So I'm begging you not to do that to him. I emailed the principal. I've emailed the counselors. I've emailed his teachers. I've called. They're busy. They don't have time to talk to me. I mean, they don't do Zoom. They don't do Zoom meetings. Really? I'm doing one right now. So I'm sitting here with you guys. I'm willing to tell my job, I can't come today. My hours are cut. I got to make sure I pay my rent, my mortgage. I'll do that, whatever it takes. I just don't want you guys to start changing it at the end. And if you were going to do that, you should have made it clear to them in the beginning. You don't just pounce on them. You're going to have so many kids failing in Cordova that they'll all be taking 12th grade all over again, or your summer schools will be packed. And I don't know what else to say. I hope you take everything everyone has said here into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I greatly appreciate your comments. Who do we have next?
Annie Gladding.
Ms. Gladding, welcome.
Thank you. I too don't have a prepared speech. I can feel for Donna. I think that the only equitable thing you can do here is provide choice to students. I don't envy your position, board. You're in a really difficult one. I'm not sure there's a right answer and one that's going to make everybody. In fact, I am sure there is not an answer that's going to make everybody happy. I am too in a unique situation. In my house, I have twins who are both juniors in high school, both working very hard for what the future looks like. And I am struggling as a parent right now to keep them motivated because frankly, they're getting nothing from teachers on what it means, what grading policies look like. And I don't blame the teachers, by the way. I'm not making them the enemy here. They don't have guidance to say how they should be grading. And so they're waiting. And we've been waiting for over a month. And my kids are asking, why am I working so hard, Mom, when some of my peers are not even showing up? Why am I working hard? And every morning I have to have a conversation with them about integrity and doing the right thing and doing it because there will be payoff when you do the right thing. But it's getting exhausting and hard because there's not a decision. And so I think to be equitable, you need to make a decision. And it really concerns me that I think David had some good comments early on. Saying, you know, it's very concerning that we're now going back. We came out very loudly saying we would not harm students, whether they're doing well or whether they're not doing well. And frankly, in my house, I have a little of both. Some would benefit from credit, no credit. Some would benefit from grade. It's a unique situation. I understand that, but it also gives me a very unique perspective into two different types of students. One who would benefit one way and one who would benefit the other. There isn't a great answer. The only inequitable thing for you to do right now is to not make a decision. So I encourage you strongly to consider passing this. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the next speaker.
This is Gunn. There's no last name, sorry.
Hello, my name is Gianna Gunn, and I'm a junior at Folsom High School. I wanted to comment on the April 24th addendum to the March 25th MOU between FCUSD and FCEA addressing the impacts and effects of COVID-19. As a student, I would like to voice my support on allowing the students to have the option of requesting letter grades over the pass-fail system on our transcripts. The option to choose is particularly important to those who are reliant on their highest possible GPA for purposes of merit-based scholarships and college admissions. As an example, the University of California Admissions Office has stated on their website that while they will accept a pass or fail, pass grades will not be included in the GPA calculation, nor will they receive an extra point in the GPA if they are approved honors, AP, or IB courses. This has the potential to negatively impact the kids who have taken these courses with the intent of achieving a GPA over 4.0, which is critical to qualify for competitive colleges, such as our very own UCs. By removing the option for FCUSD students, we are eliminating their ability to increase their overall GPA, whereas other districts across the state have already declared they are allowing this option. This means as FCUSD students, we are no longer fairly competing against those who had a choice. Retaining the option to petition will encourage us to continue to work hard during distance learning and allows us to make our own choices about our future. Thank you for allowing me to represent my classmates, and I hope you'll take my statement into consideration while you are voting.
Thank you.
Next is Christina Ray.
Ms. Ray.
The addendum to the MOU that you are proposing presents a variety.
You just muted yourself there. There you go.
The addendum to the MOU that you are proposing presents a variety of problems for the students you're supposed to be working to protect. I've long been a supporter of grading for mastery, not for participation, not for turning work in on time, not for writing your name in the correct spot on the paper, followed by the date, class, and period in legible handwriting. None of that matters. What I do care about is my students and their learning. To ask teachers to assign grades to those who want them, or even grades for any student, as Mr. Reed is suggesting, is asking teachers to assign a grade for privilege, access to a digital learning platform, and time to engage. I have students at Vista who are unable to engage at the level they would be in the classroom because they are working in essential and family businesses. I have students who are unable to engage because they and their family members are ill. I have students who are unable to engage because they are sharing devices in their households with spotty internet access. I have students who are unable to engage because they are hungry. To then ask those students about whom I care so deeply to be assessed as business as usual is extremely problematic. When colleges and universities look at our schools' profiles for the next 4 years, they will see that students had a choice: letter grades or credit no mark. We cannot assure that those students who elect to choose credit or no mark for any number of reasons will not be held at a disadvantage when compared to those students who went for the not reflective of learning or mastery letter grade. We are doing harm to our students if we move forward with this revised MOU. I encourage you to please listen to your teachers, listen to the experts. We were all hired to work at this wonderful school district for a reason. We worked hard at some point of the top universities in our credential programs, applied for the perfect job at our dream schools, and beat out competition to be here today. I urge you to put the same amount of respect and pride in your teachers as we have in ourselves for working with such amazing students, and to side with those students and what is best for them by listening to the teachers union and revising our grading policy as credit no mark. Please go back to the table with FCEA and renegotiate for an equitable grading policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray.
Last, Mr. Clark, is Kelly Hillsland.
Yes. Ms. Hillsland.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay. So what Christina Ray just said is really important for people to understand. When we create a two-tiered system with a pass system and a graded system, we create two different tiers, and all of the A students will be skimmed off the top, and everyone will know they earned their A. And maybe some B students will choose that as well. But then when that's put on our school report card that universities open in order to judge students and how rigorous their schedules were, they see that addendum. They see that the kid could have chosen a letter grade. And if they could have chosen a letter grade, but chose pass instead, we already know the grade. We already know that they got a B or less. So we might as well go to regular grading if we're going to give choice. It's really important to understand that the system that we're setting up right now, if we agree to this addendum, creates a two-tiered system, and two-tiered systems never work. It's really important for people to understand that. If we go to simply pass or no mark, it means every student who gets a pass gets the best grade that Folsom Cordova offers for that term. And that means every kid gets an A, because every kid gets the highest grade our school would give. So it gives them a distinct advantage over other schools. So the schools putting most of their students in a dilemma are the ones giving the kids choice. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that is the truth. When a school offers 20 AP classes, a kid should take 20 AP classes if they want to be competitive. But if a school only offers 3 AP classes, that student only needs to take 3 AP classes to be competitive. It's really important for people to understand that kids will not be judged if their school does not offer them a choice. If we set a boundary, and because we're demanding the social and emotional well-being of our students so we don't stress them out, I have AP kids who are willing to stress out and do the work. I do. But I don't want to do that to them right now. I want to make this as supportive and emotionally stable as possible. I want to tell them that I am going to be able to give them the highest mark that Folsom Cordova allows. And I think that is of utmost importance for people to understand. Choice is not equity. The equitable choice is to create a system that is either pass or no mark. That's it.
Mr.
Thank
Clark,
you.
we have one more. Blessings. Oh, 2 more, sorry.
Did that sound right?
What? We're here.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, hi, my name is Blessings Norwood, and I'm a senior at Cordova High. The suggestion of a credit/no mark based system regarding the grades of students of Folsom Cordova Unified School District is the best option for students as an entirety. Forcing the continuation of letter grades that is meant to work best in a typical school environment disregards and ignores the real-life effects this pandemic has caused to disadvantaged students and families. The intentional disregard to fully consider and implement credit/no mark causes the success rate of the student body to drop significantly. Most of the student body consists of students living in negative socioeconomic environments, preventing them from excelling like they would in a typical school setting. Students are forced to not only deal with the pressures of school life, but also the full responsibilities of home life. Most students are dependent by their families, essential workers like myself, unable to access consistent Wi-Fi, like the stimulating environment needed to focus or do their assignments do their best on assignments, and much, much more. Letter grades work for everybody if everybody were in the same or similar situation. It works if our school and our academics are stable like pre-pandemic. How can you be head of our district, claim you want the best for us, but cannot accommodate or take charge and do what's best for all of us, not just the non-minority? Which isn't that ignore that. You hire minority teachers to help better connect with us, but don't listen to them when those same educators tell us what students lack and need to be better successful and educated scholars. Take ownership and take action for the betterment of us minority students too. We matter just as much as the students' parents who refuse to consider anybody else but themselves and their privileged children. If colleges like Harvard are able to adjust and implement programs and change their grading systems due to an unexpected global pandemic, then so can this school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blessings.
Last, Mr. Clark, is Janki Trivedi.
Vidi?
Right. Hi, my name is Neil Trivedi. As a student at Vista Del Lago and a junior, I second what Ms. Hilson has to say. The problem with this addendum is the addition of a choice, the option to choose between letter grading and pass no mark. This would not only cause complexity with college admissions and GPA, but it would also just propagate inequity between all students who opt to do either credit or either letter grades. As a student, I implore the committee to not pass this addendum, go back to the drawing board and remove the option of having a choice to choose either between letter grades or pass no mark. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Mr. Clark. This is Angela. And I'm going to be reading some of the written comments that have come in. Just to let you know that as of 6 o'clock, there had been 58 comments that had come in on the Google form, and more have come in since then. At that time, 6 o'clock, out of the 58 that had come in, 53 comments were against grading and 5 were in favor of grades, and there were 2 other neutral comments. So in the interest of time, I'm going to read representations to comments from each of those categories that reflect the sentiment. So we'll start with a comment from Jessica Bolanos Wood. I write to you as a former FCUSD student, employee, and community member. It is critical that we shift away from the traditional grading system during the COVID-19 crisis. Yes, a crisis. We are in a global pandemic that is affecting all of us differently. I've had students trying to write essays on their cell phones, families of 12 where older siblings are caretakers, students who are homeless, families with sick elderly members, students who cannot learn because translators are not available, and students who are risking their health and working essential jobs because their finances demand it. I can tell you countless stories. This is not a time to try and get an accurate depiction of student work and effort. The only thing letter grades will reflect is a measure of privilege, not mastery or learning. Yes, we believe all of our students are capable and able to succeed given the tools. However, what we have now is a crisis where the tools have been taken away, privileges heightened to those who have them, and inequities made larger for our most vulnerable populations. If we really want grades, give all students an A for this term. That will satisfy everyone. I urge you to please listen to what experts across the nation are saying, that care and protection of our students' well-being must come first. Universities across the nation have already said that spring 2020 grades will not be factored in, so why must we put our teachers in a position to make a judgment? Please be on the right side of history so FCUSD can look back and say it stood with all of our students and families. This is an unprecedented time, and we don't know what will happen a year from now. However, we do know what can happen now. This is your moment. Thank you for all you do. Next comment submitted by Jordan Kaitapu, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I'm Jordan Kaitapu, 2-year president of Cordova High's Black Student Union. I advocate for fellow students to help promote a constructive and healthy learning environment and to ensure that we all have the tools and resources necessary to succeed. It would be negligent on my part as a youth leader to ignore the known impacts of this sudden and dramatic change to students' lives. Not only are Black students and students of color statistically at a disadvantage compared to their peers in regards to access to reliable internet, which we all depend on to complete these assignments, but also for their mental health. Considering it is not a secret that students' mental health has been challenged due to existing conditions at home, or that they are forced to physically distance themselves from their friends and family, it is not fair to test their overall productivity in reference to assignments many of us struggle to find motivation to complete. There is a direct correlation between students' mental and emotional well-being to their performance academically. Traditional grades in this climate do not test levels of intelligence and are not an accurate representation of effort, just merely a measurement of the amount of resources accessible to students. Black youth is 20% more likely to experience mental illness during times where toxic stressors are higher, putting them and their educational career at risk. Therefore, they are disproportionately impacted during this pandemic. To punish students for not having the ability to perform well based on already skewed standards and lack of proper resources is negligent. A solution would be to drop letter grades from our educational policies completely to attempt to level the field for all students, regardless of the resources they may or may not have. The next comment does not have a name. Please ensure that high school students have the option to receive letter grades for the semester. Students who have worked very hard up until March 13th and since then would essentially be punished if they weren't allowed to receive grades recognizing their work. That's certainly not the lesson we want them to learn. The next comment was submitted without a name. Thank you for taking my comment. As a parent of a high-performing high school student, I would like to advocate for students to have the option for letter grades for spring 2020. My position is based on information from numerous sources in college consulting work, which includes guest speakers from universities across the country. First, there is the issue of unconscious bias among college admissions officers regarding files. This has been reported upon in length regarding applicants that are test optional versus those that submit SAT, ACT scores, and could very well come into play for applications that show credit, no credit for spring 2020 versus those that include letter grades. Spring of junior year is a critical marker in college admissions, especially among selective and highly selective institutions. Second, with SAT and ACT test dates canceled, experts in the higher education industry are surmising that course grades will take even heavier weight in an applicant's file, as students are losing the opportunity to test as part of college entry. To date, only one school nationwide, MIT, has committed to not accepting test scores at all. UC policy states applications may be submitted without scores, and industry experts again relate this back to unconscious bias, as well as further supporting that high school course grades will be critically important to an application. I understand that a district decision for letter grades is not a positive for all student situations, just as I understand that a district decision for credit, no credit, is not a positive for all students. I advocate for a board policy that meets this moment with options that allow students to determine what will best serve them in this challenging time. The next comment is submitted by Angela Rome. Can you please clarify how credit, no mark, will impact high school students' GPA calculation and how credit, no mark, or letter grades will be determined for Vista Del Lago classes that began on March 16th versus those that began on January 6th? And the final comment I will read out loud. Annie Gladding. I would like to understand two things in the addendum, high school students. One, how and what format are students to request letter grades from their teachers? Two, what are the opportunities to improve the final grade? My two high school juniors have been working really hard on all classes assigned work with nearly no positive results for the effort. Teachers say they are waiting for the district to tell them what this means. It's hard to keep them motivated. Please help. They are trying to do the right thing. And that would end the public comments that I'm reading out loud. And again, I will say that comments are still coming in.
Mr. Clark, may I interrupt just for a moment? We also have a written comment submitted by our chief negotiator for FCEA, Debbie Krikorian, that she would like Mr. Ogden to read. So at this time, if you would allow that to be read, Mr. Ogden, go ahead and share that, please.
Okay, this is written by Deb Krikorian, and she is the lead negotiator for FCEA. Hello, board members and Dr. Kaligian. As a bargaining chair for FCEA, I want to thank the FCEA Executive Board and bargaining team for their endless hours the past few weeks. I also want to recognize the FCUSD management team, school administration, FCEA unit members, and our CSEA unit members as well. To our families, thank you for the support you are giving our teachers and your students. And to our students, you are the future who are learning many lessons during this challenging time period. And we'll take those lessons to make the world a kinder, gentler place to live. I want you to know the MOU grading policy struggle has saddened me. Teachers around the district are bearing the weight of your child's fears, struggles, and hardships and disconnection. Colleges around the nation are addressing the need to accept credit, no credit, and make grade allowances for entrance this year and beyond. Harvard University sent out a letter saying they recognize the need for changes in the entrance requirements as most colleges across the nations. Many students struggle beginning of the school year and count on teachers to help them catch up during the fourth quarter to allow for graduation and credits earned. Colleges realize their own students should be held harmless due to life circumstances. We try to hold all students harmless during this pandemic, but we can only try our best to help the students we reach. For those we do not reach, we must not penalize them for circumstances beyond their control. My opinion, which does not reflect the opinion of FCUSD or any other member, we should pass all students and let families cope. Our students are not receiving all standards as set by the state, yet they are learning life lessons which school cannot teach. Parents, as you are choosing along with your child whether to take the grade option or not, no, colleges will not weight this semester with the same weight as other semesters. Your child is stressed about losing touch with friends, family members, and the stress parents are feeling with the economy and economic uncertainty. We have students who are working full-time to help family businesses stay afloat, homeless for the first time because a parent has lost their job, have not been able to connect to the internet for a variety of reasons, taking care of the household because mom or dad are working at a local grocery store, delivering goods, first responders, etc. And they must keep a distance from their children to keep them healthy, trying to help themselves learn as well as their siblings in a strange online learning world, lonely, anxiety-ridden, depressed, transient, following a parent who is lost, and much more. My child in college was excited to be hired as an intern to learn from experts in her field of study. She depended upon the experience to help find work as she graduates this semester, only to find the reality of her internship being cut short as the state closed their doors to interns, and she is wondering what her future holds. I want everyone to know, no matter what the grading policy chosen from the state options in times like these, children are harmed. My hope and prayers are for resiliency and perseverance from our students. I know they are strong, and through the lessons learned in hardship, they will be okay and become stronger and wiser than the generation before them. The bargaining team, management, and labor have worked together to try our best to hold children harmless during the pandemic. Our FCEA unit members struggle with the emotional weight of our students, our families, and each other while working and learning more than we ever have before. In conclusion, my day begins and ends with a prayer. I hope you will recognize the tears our unit members have shed with students, families, and members of our own families during the past few weeks. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Clark, I just want to let everyone know that all the comments that were written in will be sent to the board members after the meeting, and all the names will be recorded in the minutes.
Thank you for that. With that being said, I will open it up for questions from the board.
Questions?
Mr. Short?
Yes, I want to make a question is, if we continue to negotiate, we can come back and just revise this, and what would be the timeline? And we do it really fast and have a special board meeting so that we can get this going? Or do we have another board meeting scheduled out here next week?
Yes, we can sit down with our FCEA team and negotiate again. I know our teachers are very anxious to have a policy in place. So I know they would be motivated to come back and meet. And we do have a board meeting on May 7th, but if you wanted to schedule a special board meeting prior to that, I would defer to the boards.
Okay, that's my question, but I do have comments later when you open up to the comments.
Sure. Questions from the board? Any other board members?
I have a comment, but I'll wait till the questions have been asked first.
Gotcha. Any other questions from the board?
I have a few questions if no one else has anything. Let's see.
Mr. Hoover?
I kind of want to talk a little bit about, you know, I know there was some very heart-wrenching stories here, and you know, I really feel for all of the families that are struggling during this time. And as you know, a household myself with 2 working parents, it's extremely difficult to help your kids with school during this time, and I want to acknowledge that up front. And I think that was the goal. And in the MOU, it talks about holding students harmless for what happened before we transition to distance learning. I think that's a really important component of this. So I guess my question is, that is in the MOU. How does that look in practice? How, you know, where we're not harming students for anything that happened prior to distance learning?
I'm going to ask Ms. Holloman to elaborate a little bit on the response to that question.
Good evening, board members, and good evening, Dr. Collegian. We are doing our best in this environment to work with our teachers and with our grades to hold students harmless. What exactly does that mean? And there has certainly been a lot of gray area around that phrase. Would have been nice if the state and or the county would have just come out and said, this is how we're going to do grades. So with that said, I know there has been a lot of question around grade point averages, how are GPAs calculated? And so I will ask you, Board Member Hooper, is that the direction you're going, or do you have a different specific question?
Well, I guess so. I know that some of the information that went out to Folsom High School students, you know, the explanation in that information was that, you know, essentially whatever your grade is now, you could have that grade. And, you know, if you want to improve it, you can improve it. I guess my question is, why can't we allow students to have the grade or petition for the grade that they had before distance learning? If that was indeed a better grade and they're struggling now, you know, in their family situation, which is totally understandable, why couldn't we allow them to petition for their previous grade?
Well, and I think that would be something that we would have to negotiate and take back to the table. We had that conversation about leaving third quarter grades for Folsom High and CHS, and Vista Del Lago, with their unique schedule, of course, would not have, they did not complete 3/4 of the year. They have only completed half of their year, with some of their students moving into brand new courses. So they had no foundational grade on which to rely. So if that's the direction in which we want to go, we would have to go back to FCEA to see what that would look like. And that's giving a grade based on third quarter as they sat with their grade in third quarter. And a lot of students, especially seniors in third quarter, no disrespect to teachers, but they like to motivate them in third quarter by maybe if they're on the cusp between a B and a C, they give them the C to hope that they push them forward. So that is sometimes because a third quarter grade is a progress grade. It is not a grade that goes on the transcript.
Thank you. I think, I want to be careful here not to get stuck on, if we do decide to renegotiate this, I want to be careful not to get stuck between two options only, where we're, it's basically credit, no mark, or credit and we choose grades. I think a couple of the speakers, the two speakers said that the problem isn't the grades, the problem is the choice. If the problem is the choice, then, maybe we can explore different ways to do grades. But I find it, I don't buy into the argument that credit, no mark is going to be the best for all of our students. I think that if the choice is the problem, let's discuss that. But I am concerned for students that, are looking at grades. And I kind of wanted to point out, so I found it interesting that a lot of the studies that have been presented and sent over to the board, great research has been sent over about the value of credit, no mark, and kind of the reasoning behind it. And I read those and I appreciate that those were sent. However, one of the things I was interested to find is that one of those studies came from Stanford. So I thought, okay, well, what is Stanford doing? What is Stanford doing in terms of applicants? And honestly, there's, I'm trying to find here, some of what these colleges do, but I guess my point is that, I understand the UCs and the CSUs have come out and been very clear. And we appreciate that, I think, as a state, as a number of our students are going to end up at UCs and CSUs. But my concern is for all the other colleges, the hundreds of universities throughout the country, that, it's just so hard to say with a surety to parents that, you're going to be fine. Grades aren't going to matter. I'm not sure that we can say that with confidence. And we can't assume that every kid is going to be applying to a college in California. I do have more comments, but I'll hold on to those for now if anyone else wants to speak.
President Clark, I actually do have a couple questions now.
Yes, sir.
So, I understand that both CSU and UC have indicated that they will not provide any judgment or weight on the basis of credit, no mark, or pass. And I think that, as Josh indicated, that's very much appreciated. My question is to staff, do we know about what other colleges and universities are doing? Do we know what the universities and colleges on the East Coast are doing? Are they taking the similar view? And if we do know that, how do we know that?
I have staff who have researched that, and I would either ask Dr. Huber or Dr. Cook-Harvey to respond to that, please.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Shauna Cook-Harvey. So I spoke with Harvard University and I researched Yale University's website and Stanford University, and it appears that, at least with regard to those colleges, that they are allowing students to submit whatever their district or their school has made as the standard for this particular semester or quarter in spring 2020. Excuse me for being out of breath. So what that means is that if we as a district decide that we are restricting students to a pass or no mark during this semester, that the universities will not hold that against students in terms of calculating a GPA or determining whether their admissions would have been granted or not, that they are going to be looking at the whole child. And what that means is that a combination of factors, as would normally be the case in terms of GPA and transcript, test scores if they're available, a history of participation in extracurriculars, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the real question for the colleges, and I actually called Harvard University to ask them about how they would be viewing potential students from our district that would be applying. And they said that whatever the district offers as the highest potential option, that is how they would view potential applicants. So if the highest that a student could earn is a pass or a credit, and a student earns a pass or a credit, they will consider that the highest potential option that a student could have earned. Whereas if we open it up more broadly and students could earn an A or a B or a C and or a pass or a credit, then they will consider that students who earn a credit would have not opted for the most rigorous option available. So really it comes down to the district decision as setting the context within which a student is achieving. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, my observation is Harvard, Yale, and Stanford are usually ranked 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes Princeton bumps one of them to a lower spot to 4. But essentially, we just discussed what the most elite of the most elite colleges are doing, which, quite frankly, 99.9% of our students are not going to Harvard, Yale, or Stanford. I'd be more curious about what the next tier of colleges are doing. What's Boston University doing? What's Bates College doing? What's Bedoin doing? What's Colgate College doing? What's Duke doing? What's University of Chicago doing? What's University of Santa Clara doing? What's Pepperdine doing? What's University of or State University of New York doing? I mean, these are the level of colleges that are not the elite of the elite. And I think that's more telling to me what those types of colleges are doing than what Harvard, Yale, and Stanford are doing.
I could speak to that. And I think it would be exactly the same as they would do in a typical school year as they evaluate the package that students submit in order to gain admissions. And that would be looking at the highest possible option that a student could engage in to demonstrate their knowledge, their understanding, their engagement with school. And so, for example, I think a previous public comment, I can't remember if it was staff member, or teacher, or counselor, commented earlier tonight saying, this is exactly her argument that she explained, and that is that if a school district only offered one AP, for example, and a student took that advanced placement class and did well in that class, then that student would be viewed as a student who was attempting to engage in the most rigorous, most challenging course offering possible. Whereas another neighboring school district, for example, might offer 17 or 8 advanced placement classes, and a student in that district or in that school, if they took all 8 or all 17 of those advanced placement classes, then that student would be viewed as attempting to take the most rigorous options available. And even though these two students in the hypothetical example I'm giving are taking, one is taking far more advanced placement courses than the other, they are both attempting to do the most that's possible. And so when we open up the option, as is stated in this MOU that's before you tonight, if we make it so that students are given the choice to choose between a grade or a credit and no mark, we're essentially saying that they can take the most without considering the fact that students are in 22,000 different home contexts attempting to engage in school under conditions which our school district has no control, right? Because people are in their homes right now. Whereas if we had all of those students coming into the school building, into our 33 schools, then we could rightfully say that we've provided additional resources, additional supports, instructional aids, bilingual instructional aids, special education resources and supports, extra tutoring and training and assistance in an attempt to level the playing field. But currently we do not and we cannot necessarily provide all of those additional supports at the level that we would typically be able to do in a traditional school setting. And so if we allow students to actually make the choice or ask them to make the choice between a letter grade or a credit and no mark, it's actually in many ways a false choice, because it is essentially allowing those that have the most privilege, the most access, the greater ability to engage in work at this time, the opportunity to have a grade that might outshine those who don't have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you for that explanation. Next question I have is, do we know the percentages of school districts across the country and what options they are going with? How many school districts across the country are going credit, no credit? How many school districts across the country are going with a grading option? Or how many school districts are going with a hybrid, such as what's contained in the MOU?
I can't necessarily, maybe you're not directing that at me, and I can't necessarily answer that question with certainty. However, if we take the challenge success guidance that's been offered, which is a local nonprofit that's out of Stanford University that has been guiding and supporting the most some of the most competitive schools in our country, K-12 schools in our country, around how to find balance in life and how to achieve happiness and mental and social and emotional well-being, while also engaging in very rigorous and academics at very high levels. The guidance that they are offering actually says that they recommend schools and districts across the nation limit grading options for this time period in the midst of a global pandemic, that it would be credit and no mark or credit and incomplete, in an effort to lower the amount of stress that students are experiencing, and specifically because we cannot control the context within which students are operating and being asked to learn.
My final question is, can staff indicate what our neighboring school districts are doing? Just summarize, not in great detail, but for the neighboring school districts to Folsom, Cordova, such as Rockland, El Dorado, San Juan, Elk Grove, if you could tell us what they're doing.
Yes, we were able to gather some of that data. San Juan Unified is doing the credit, no credit with the option for grades, petitioning for a grade. Elk Grove is staying with their traditional letter grade schedule. Roseville Joint is doing the hybrid model of credit, no credit with the option for grades. El Dorado Union is also doing a hybrid model of credit, no credit with the option for grades. Davis Joint Unified is just offering credit, no credit. Natomas Unified, they would get no grade lesser than what they had at the third quarter, but they had the chance to improve their grade. And same thing with Twin Rivers.
Thank you. I just have a comment or observations, so I can wait until all the other questions are answered.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board? I did have one question, and hopefully this can be answered. So let's say, I know that at first this request was due on May 1st, correct? For if this passed and students requesting their grade, or if they wanted to choice in, it would be due on the 1st, correct?
That's not correct. It's May 4th.
It has been moved to May 4th. Okay, so, and I think one of the community members asked a question, how do they go about doing this? Because there's nothing in writing about that. It's something that will roll out that teachers will discuss. Because actually, I'm looking, I don't even see anything on the MOU about that. unless I missed it.
So we talked about putting together a frequently asked question list for our teachers, for our students, for our families, because there are many nuances to whatever direction we go that, and we've heard these questions asked many times. So we thought if we put together a frequently asked question list, that would help guide the direction of whatever the policy may be.
Okay. And also, if they chose to opt out and I guess, go with the credit, no credit thing, would there be something in place for that as well? Because I understand that they can opt out of this if they wanted a grade. They can opt out like a week before. Will there be something in place for that by then?
There's also language that that says they may rescind their request by May 22nd.
And what's the protocol? How do they rescind? Do they send another letter, another email? How does that work?
Again, we would have that as part of the FAQ that we would send out following the board's decision.
Okay. So here's my other question. If it decided to go with this, the way that it's written now, how fast would that FAQ come out? How soon can we get it done?
We get it done as soon as we could, probably within,
okay.
If it's approved tonight, we try to get it done before the end of the week.
Yeah, because that's a very small window. Okay, that's it on my end. Any additional questions from the public?
President, I have another one if you want to get ready.
Okay.
And I have a question too as well.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything from the
Mr.
public.
Clark, I don't have anybody from the public.
Thank you. Board Member Short?
Yeah, I have one question. Under the current law on our grading system, and this is more of a legal question or guiding principle question, under the law, my understanding is that we have to create a harmless or equal grading system as it is today when you do grading. My question is, with this options where I hear does it equate to the equivalency, to the same equal hold all kids harmless based on what we see here today on this amendment compared to the way the grading system is held to a standard today?
Mr. Short, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. Are you saying the way the grades prior to our school closures?
Yeah, today's grading system is based on it has to be equal for all, and there's no harm to any kids, right? That's supposed to be equal, right? Under this, does it fall under the same equivalent criteria? Is it considered equal?
Well, the State Department of Education have given us several options to choose from, and they, I think, purposely didn't tell school boards in California which option to choose. They wanted districts to make the local decision to choose which option is best going to meet the demographics and the majority of their students and holding all students harmless. As we heard, from many other comments.
But that's not the question. The question is just a straight legal question. Does this stand by itself, equal, and hold all kids harmless? Just a straight equivalency across the board without all those other options the state gives, because I know they want to give local control. If you just look at it from how it holds harm, does it hold kids harmless?
The way it's written now?
Yes.
I would say there's probably nothing that's going to give 100% holding all students harmless. So we have to choose the options that are the option that's going to best hold the majority of our 21,000 students harmless. There's no perfect solution in this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Board Member Ranking.
Thank you. I just want to go back to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What was referred to, if we go to credit, or let's say pass or no credit, that credit would be the best grade that FCUSD offers. So that would be the highest consideration. How would that hold up to districts that are doing A's for everybody? Which is, it was compared that both options are very similar. If that.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Alleman on that one.
Thank you. Well, I think, Joanne, to answer your question, it seems as though going back again to what was explained prior, whatever our grading system is, that will be what evaluators of a transcript will look at. So, for example, if A is the grade that people are getting, then that would probably equate to what we have with credit. And I think Kelly Hillsland kind of brought that up too. If we give A's and no mark, then those are the high and the low. If we give credit, no mark, that's our high and that's our low. And there's nothing in between. Does that help?
Yeah, so, but if some of the districts go with A's for all, does that give the GPA bump?
Yes, the A would give the GPA. Well, dependent on how those districts are labeling that A, if we gave all A's, I would assume that A would bump all GPAs by those A's. And that would be an A in every course.
I had to ask that question. I know there were some members of the public who were interested in that option that is being considered by some large districts. So, thank you.
I have a question with that. What would that demotivate kids to improve during that semester?
I don't know if it would motivate or demotivate.
Right.
But I don't know. I think that colleges and universities, when they evaluate transcripts during this time of this pandemic, they're going to have to reevaluate transcripts through a different lens.
So when we were discussing options with our professionals, was the option of A for all discussed and vetted at the time?
I did not discuss that option. Dr. Kakarvi, are you still on? Was that option brought up with some of the other universities?
I didn't specifically ask universities about A for all, but I think getting at Ms. Ranking's question, the point is that each district will be viewed individually, not necessarily in comparison. I'm sorry, not necessarily in comparison to other districts. So Folsom Cordova students will be viewed as Folsom Cordova students, and whatever parameters we put around grading during this time is the way that our students will be viewed. It will not be viewed in comparison to Davis or Oakland Unified or Roseville or Sac City, for example.
Okay, so what I was just trying to get to is if our goal, our vision for this district is equal access, equity across. So to me, the A's for all or credit, no credit, taking the credit grade gives our kids all the same advantage. And would we be doing our kids a better service by considering the A's for all? But that's a whole other discussion.
I think if I could jump in, I think the other piece to what you might be asking is whether the GPA bump might be worth it to give everyone an A at this point. And I think regardless of what options we offer students, be it A's for everybody or credit for everybody or incomplete for everybody, if that were even on the table, I think the point is that whatever we offer, no matter who the student is and what district they're coming from, spring 2020 will always have a mark on it in some ways because of the pandemic. But because of the context that we're in, regardless of what grade or credit or mark students have on their report card, there's a universal understanding that the entire planet is embroiled in a collective trauma that we are all trying to figure out and cope with. And I think no matter what students are coming with or what they earn, or in air quotes around earn at this point or not, universities will understand that this is a unique and unprecedented time writ large.
Thank you.
Chris, I got another question.
Mr. Short.
Yeah, back to the amendment, item 2, where it says credit no credit, and they can bail out when they opt in, and then they bail out on May 22nd. was it considered, why, number one, why was it considered the bailout? Why don't you just say if you commit, go all the way and take the grade as you perform? Or why was it considered to, at that point to give them the option to bail out? Probably for Doug.
Dawn, do you want to take that? Do you recall what the discussion was around the table?
I do. When we talk about the grade, mark, credit, or no mark, or we talk about someone who would opt for a grade, the lowest they could get was what they had on March 13th. So a student could conceivably, on March 13th, have a C and conceivably say, you know, talk to their teacher, say, what do I need to do to move this C up to an A? Or I could get a credit on this. And if the student, for some reason, couldn't make that progress and did not want to see on their report card, they could opt for the credit. So that would give them a fallback plan if the student wasn't able to tackle what they thought they were going to be able to tackle early in the month. And the idea was the no harm, you know, no worse than March 13th, and options. This one was options for high school students. The option for grades does not exist in this MOU for middle school or elementary school students.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I have a quick question on that note.
Mr. Hoover?
Shauna, I was wondering what you thought. I know someone in the public comments brought up this issue of unconscious bias and this idea that, you know, I know you said that our students are only going to be judged based on, you know, compared to those in their district, but it seems like there would be more to the calculation than that in terms of, you know, maybe, you know, they say they're not going to care, but at a certain point, you know, what are you judging the students on? And when you're looking at a student that has, you know, grades and a student that has credit, and then there's no test scores to really judge. So, like, I guess my question is there a chance that that unconscious bias, which has creeped in other areas, creep in this scenario as well?
I think certainly unconscious bias is everywhere around us, swirling around us like the air that we breathe. And we can't avoid that as human beings. So I think that's certainly there. But, you know, I'm not an admissions officer. So I'm trying to speak, you know, from the best of my perspective and what I've spoken with admissions professionals about, and, you know, my understanding of research and guidance from, you know, different organizations across the nation that are attempting to assist districts like ours in this unique situation, trying to make a decision. So I'm not sure how best to answer your question, but I would just, you know, err on the side of that bias is everywhere and we all have it.
Okay. Superintendent Kaligian, you mentioned that the state had some recommended options. Do you have, like, was it like 3 or 4, or what was the, I mean, I don't need to know exactly what they were, but was it like, these are the 3 or these are the 4 that you should pick between, or?
So the state offered several options for grading. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So a minimum of 6 options. And part of that is, you know, do you use standards-based grading? If you use standards-based grading, you might consider something different. Okay. Credit was an option, but they did not prescribe one of those 6. They gave it as choice.
Did any of them float the idea of, you know, keeping grades, but finding a more flexible way to implement them given the shutdown? Besides A's for all, I guess would be a qualifier.
Well, one of the options was just using the current grades.
Okay.
At the time of shutdown, I should say.
All right.
Are we up to comments, observations now, Mr. President?
Actually, yes. Let's go into comments and observations. Let's roll into that right now.
I have some comments I'd like to.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Yeah, let me start off by saying it's unfortunate that there is not one universal policy on grading, because that would be ultimately what is most equitable across the board for what people are discussing tonight and what we've been getting in emails as well. However, the federal government failed to develop a standard grading policy. The state government failed to develop a standard grading policy. The county, who had wanted all the county schools to be lockstep on everything and have been doing a fairly decent job up until this point, has failed to develop a standard universal grading policy. Instead, all of those entities basically said, it's up to the districts, let you guys decide. And I know that in another school district or in another part outside of this state, they sent an email out to all of the parents in the entire county. And this is what it said, just one sentence out of it. It said, the district is currently working with other school districts in the region on how fourth quarter and final grades will be calculated, because they want to treat all the students in the region similarly, hence equitably, so that no one in that region is going to be treated any differently than any other student in that region. That's what a progressive school county is doing outside of Sacramento County, but we're not doing that. Instead, it's a free-for-all. And so now we have to look, all right, now we have to look at what makes sense for FCUSD. That's where we're at now. And to state up front, there is no perfect choice. I think there is no solution that not only will make everybody happy, but even the solution that we end up with isn't going to be the perfect solution. So we have to keep that in mind. And, in making a decision about grading, we'll have to look at a number of factors, including what our neighboring districts are doing, because to do otherwise would be inequitable. Essentially, the district the county I had mentioned outside of Sacramento County, they are having to make that decision, and they're choosing to do what all their fellow schools are doing in the region. So what are our neighboring districts doing? Our neighboring FCUSD districts doing? And the answer is, almost universally, they're all doing credit, no credit, and a choice of a grade at the student's option. That's what they're doing, with the exception of Elk Grove, and God knows what they're thinking and going full forward on grading. And I know Davis was mentioned, but let's face it, Davis is a different type of school district than we are. They do not operate on a traditional schedule. They operate on a year-round schedule. So I don't think you can compare Davis to FCUSD. I've received, and I want to acknowledge it, and I want to thank all the emails that we've been getting. It's very much appreciated. I've read every single one of them. I've tried to respond to most of them, and I apologize. I got a little bit behind on responding to the ones that came in today. But I want to rest assured that I have read every single email that has come in on this matter. Out of the teachers, well, parents and teachers, if you will, of high school students in the district and the teachers who teach high school, I received 18 emails from teachers as of 2:00 this afternoon. So I may have received more after that. And I received 18 emails from teachers. And out of those 18 emails, 14 of those emails were from Vista del Lago teachers. Only 2 came from Folsom High School teachers. And only 2 came from Cordova High School teachers, which made me start to wonder, what's the disparity? Why is our Vista teachers more concerned about offering a grade option than Folsom High and Cordova High teachers? And I think the answer should be, after I thought about it, the answer I think became obvious to me, which is that Vista Del Lago operates on an entirely different schedule than Folsom High and Cordova High. While Folsom High and Cordova High students, they were in 9 weeks. They had 9 weeks of grading when they left school on March 13th, 9 weeks, because they operate on semesters. So they all had established grades. Vista Del Lago, which does not operate on that schedule, hadn't even started their final grading period yet. And so based on that, I can completely understand why Vista teachers have a major concern or dilemma on their hands. I get it. So then the question becomes, what is equitable to, or I guess the question is it equitable to ask Folsom High School and Cordova High School students to give up a grading option that their neighboring school districts universally have adopted because Vista Del Lago is on a different grading schedule? And my answer to that is no, I do not. I believe that would be, in fact, inequitable to do that to Folsom High School and Cordova High School students. And let's not forget that Vista Del Lago has already been placed in a far, far, far more equitable and preferential position than Folsom High School students and Cordova High School students. So essentially their sister schools, based on the number of credits its students can accumulate based on their schedule. I suspect that if Vista shared Folsom High's schedule and Cordova High schedule, the proposed grading MOU or this addendum wouldn't even be debated today. But they aren't. So therefore it is being debated today because again, it's a question of equity. Comparing Vista to Folsom High and Cordova High is quite frankly like comparing apples to oranges. For example, students at all three schools who started at the same in August of 2019, taking the exact same classes in their respective high schools, already have a completely different outcome. And the reason why is because Vista students have already completed that class with a full grade, while students who are at Folsom High School and Vista Del Lago are still engaged in that very class that the Vista students have already received credit, full credit for, and a grade. And so the question is that equitable? Is it equitable that Vista Del Lago students get a full credit, a full grade on a class that they started at the exact same time as the Folsom and Cordova students did, but the Folsom and Cordova students don't get that option? Then I guess, in another way, I guess it's important to note is that Folsom High School principal Howard Cadenhead on April 3rd already communicated via a Zoom or a video message to all 2,450 students at Folsom High School and the parents of those students, spending probably about 7 to 8 minutes discussing grading policy and how it's going to move forward. This is on April 3rd, over close to a month ago. And it was specifically, basically guaranteed to the students that their grade will be reflective of their March 13th grade with an opportunity to improve that grade. There was no discussion about credit, no credit, wasn't even discussed. So we have had students who are relying on that communication for a month now, who are being told, that's okay. We're gonna move you to credit, no credit, even though you've been working your butts off on grading. How is that equitable? And that leads me to basically only one conclusion, and that is that we need to follow the lead of our neighboring districts to create that universal criteria for our region that works, and quite frankly, it's an option that works for the students. It empowers the students. It gives the students the ability to make the decision. We're always talking about empowering students. I mean, I keep on hearing, we gotta empower students, we gotta empower students. What's more empowering than to give the students the very option to choose what works for them? And for the VISTA students, I guess credit, no credit makes most sense because they didn't even start their final grading period. But for the Folsom High and Cordova students, having a grade after working 9 weeks into a grading cycle and being denied their effort is just not only unequitable, but unconscionable. So, you know, I personally don't see any problem offering choice to our students. Choice is not a bad thing. And it's a real world lesson that students can learn while in high school about the power, empowering them to take their own destiny and decide how they want to approach it. So with that said, I mean, I would be happy to put a motion on the table just, or I can obviously wait till my fellow board members provide their thoughts.
And we will go into board comments right now. Mr. Reed, since you have made yours already, any other board member want to make a comment?
Mr. Clark, I think we need to address Principal Cadenhead's statement to his family, his families and students, because at that time the statement was made, the only policy that was in effect was our current grading policy. So correct. Principal Cadenhead does not make policy for grading. The only policy that was in effect then was our current policy. That's but correct. I do want to hear from the superintendent or someone in response. I think we do need to address that video. Was Mr. Cadenhead, Principal Cadenhead, involved in these discussions?
You know, I think if we look back at the timing of when Mr. Cadenhead made those comments to our students, it was prior to having the state's guidance. And we had just found out we're not coming back for the rest of the year. However, what we did know is whatever grading scenario we chose, it couldn't be harming students. I think he acted upon the best information he had at the time. We had not sat down and negotiated that yet. So, I mean, in his defense, I would say that wasn't meant to be negotiating outside of the table. He was trying to encourage our Folsom High students to continue moving forward. He, you know, we came back together, talked about it with all of our high school and secondary principals. After we got a consensus from each of our high schools, we went to the bargaining table and had the discussion there. So it's a process. It's you know, and singularly, you know, no one principal makes that policy. And I don't think he meant any harm in the statement that he made back on April 3rd. So I think we have to show him grace too in the information that he had at that point in time.
So at that time, nobody knew what we were dealing with. No. I think in some ways, I think it might be appropriate for the public to understand and tell me if I should not divulge information, but how we got to where we are now. How we had a first MOU, so how the board was presented with the first MOU that strictly was a credit, no credit option. And that was agreed upon by our negotiators and our principals and our administrators, and we had all our professionals talking about it. That was the recommendation that came to the board based on the best information from all our professionals. The board introduced the option that perhaps we knew better and we wanted to explore the credit, no credit. So I think this comes down to, in my opinion, the integrity of the board and our commitment to whether we are going to stand behind our equal access for all and our equity work that we're doing in this district. Because it boils down to providing equal access for all the students and doing what is in the best interest for all of them. So I think the simple question is, are we going to stand behind our professionals that have been working on this and took serious consideration before making the original recommendation of credit? Pass or no credit. I apologize for mixing that up. So I don't want to muddle the issue anymore, but I think that's what it comes down to. Are we going to stand behind all the work that our district is doing in this area?
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Me.
Mr. Short.
I appreciate all the folks that's come out and commented. It says a lot of what we care for our kids in our system. But I want to take a few steps back. We're in a global pandemic. Let me emphasize. Again, I'm a consulting person that deals with emergencies. I said this even as CSB. Understand the situation. It's complex. We have during the whole course of the pandemic, a lot of people didn't know where we were going. It was a path going down a foggy road. We're still in the tunnel. We haven't seen the light at the end of the tunnel. We didn't even know. A lot of these decisions were evolutionary. We were progressing. We didn't know. We never dealt with a pandemic. So as of March 13th, we had closure. We didn't know. We thought maybe 2 weeks. We thought 3 weeks. As you know now, we don't even see the light until now. We're talking about maybe starting school in July. Maybe not even. We don't know what the governor's going to do, and we don't know what this invisible enemy we have. We're basically in an emergency state, a disaster. And usually disasters and emergencies, there's a process during the whole disaster, and then there's the recovery. We haven't even got into the recovery part, the unknown part. We're going into uncharted territories. With that said, that is where everybody feels, and when I hear the people speaking tonight, very sad stories. People are dying out there. I had today in a district I work, a 15-year-old girl jumped off a bridge from anxiety from being at home and not dealing with this distance learning. There is people dying and not be able to handle it. The anxiety is at a high level. There are essential workers working. I'm one, and lost a lot of my business income. And not compared to a lot of these essential workers. Now they're even talking about them making first responders, because now we're seeing meat factories going down. People are realizing we're trying to survive in this big economic disaster and pandemic. This is stress at every household that a lot of folks have differently across the board. It doesn't discriminate from Folsom or Rancho or whatnot. Everybody's going to have their home circumstances, and it creates an unequal opportunity. We're supposed to be about equal opportunity, equal access to all our kids. My father was a retired teacher. He told me, if you do one for one student, you do it for all students. This is definitely the circumstances of these kids, that both their parents have to work essential workers, or one kid has to go to a child care thing. There are kids' anxiety, locking themselves in a room, sickness all over around us, people locked up. There are total anxiety. How can even we think about emotional social learning when we're putting more stress in our kids by saying, oh, now we need to compete for grading? And that's probably the least thing that we should be worried about right now, because down the road in this unknown recovery, I have total faith that our universities, everybody is going to come together and make this happen. Like some speakers earlier saying that it's equal, we're all in this together, and we shouldn't be adding more harm to our kids across the United States. Harvard, everyone, we've read every article, every email, everybody's going to step up and make it equal. But we should be adding more stress to our kids. Our kids, we also should be listening to our experts, our teachers. They're the people closest to the work. They do the research, they're the science. As we deal with the pandemic, we should be relying on the science. Our teachers is the science. They know what's best in the classroom. Distance learning is something we haven't done before. It is not equal. It doesn't have the same engagement, the same controls you have in the classroom. The teacher, the opportunity for the different kids that we're leaving behind because they don't even know how to deal with this. And we were still implementing this during this whole time. We have a lot to worry about here. July, the governor's talking about making up time. We haven't got to that point. This is the unknown recovery period. But to make this more complex, to add grading, to me is just, it's just already leaving behind the marginalized students. It leaves behind the English learners, the special needs kids and our special education kids is also where all the support systems are gone. Our Latinos, African American, all of them, they have different situations that we don't have equal access. And it just perplexes me that we're worried about local control and comparing to other districts around Elk Grove. I know the school board members there. They have a year-round school. We can't compare apple to apples. So they have different scenarios. They have different needs. They might have had learning distance already and flipped the switch and already did the things. So maybe that was a better choice for them. That's why local control is we need to focus on what's best for our district and what we do. We don't have the time to sit there and to analyze everything around the nation and everybody else to make a decision what's best for our kids, our district, and our staff and our teachers. We should be making this a very simple question. It needs to be equal. This does harm. It does not equal. It does harm to our kids. And we should be thinking about that and go to the not option for grades. And that's what I'll leave at that in my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Mr. Hoover.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the discussion tonight. You know, I think the reality is that this is a very difficult decision, and I think David is right that there's not going to be a perfect solution here that everyone agrees with. But you know, I have problems with some of the comments made tonight, and you know, it's a little bit frustrating. I think I think we do need to take into account our region in making this decision. Not just from a competitive perspective for universities, but also from an equity perspective. I don't believe that we're surrounded by districts that are anti-equity. I think there are, you know, in the same way that we have experts on our staff, I know they have experts on their staff, and I wouldn't call any of them anti-equity. I think that we're all doing the best that we can, and we may have a difference of opinion on the best approach here. But I think this idea that approving this MOU addendum is somehow against equity, I think is really problematic. You know, it's this idea that equity cannot happen unless everything is exactly the same. That would be disastrous if taken to the extreme. That would strip our middle schools and our high schools of the flexibility and creativity to offer different opportunities for their students. If we can't have IB at all schools, we can't have IB at all. If we can't have the same CTE offerings at all schools, then we shouldn't have CTE offerings. If we can't have a block schedule at all schools, then why do we have a block schedule at all? With all due respect, many of the teachers that are decrying the current MOU that's on the table as an attack on equity are the very same teachers that defend the block schedule and why it is so critical that Vista maintain their block schedule. I just think that equity in this context is being used as a hammer to the advantage because of they believe that credit no mark is the better way to go. And I just think that's an extremely problematic thing that's going on, because I think there's a lot more to be thought about in this discussion. And I also appreciate that. I also do not appreciate that the comment that board members with children in our high schools should not be able to vote on these issues or that they should recuse themselves. I think that's an incredibly problematic point of view. I think we need more parents on this board, and we need people that will represent parents' views. And the reality is that I have heard from dozens of parents and students that they would like to be able to maintain their grade, not because they're against equity, not because they have some problematic view or they haven't read the research, but because they want their child to have the best opportunity possible to get into a good school. And I do not believe that we can stand here today as the experts, none of the people on our staff can stand here and guarantee to these families that grading is not going to be taken into account, that grading is not going to have an impact on their lives. So I think that is definitely an issue. Finally, I think it's critical that we make a decision as soon as possible. I think delaying this decision any longer is going to continue to be a disservice to the parents and families in our district and the teachers, for that matter. We already have an agreement on the table. I think we should approve it tonight. I also, we're already one of the last school districts in our region to even get to this discussion. We're already behind everyone else. I think we follow the lead of the leaders in our district or in our region that overwhelmingly have supported this type of approach, and we approve that tonight. I think had we had more time, had the board been looped in sooner, honestly, and honestly, if this fails tonight, I think that I cannot in good conscience come back, vote for an MOU that's going to be credit no mark. I actually don't see a distinguishable difference between credit no mark and A's for all. If we're going to do credit no mark, I honestly don't see why we don't just approve an MOU that is A's for all, because there's almost no distinguishable difference between those two things. But if this does fail tonight, I think, and we do delay the process even more than we already have, I think it's critical that we look at an option that allows for grades, allows students to petition for a grade before they left school. Let that be their grade, or let them improve their grade. Hold students harmless with the option to improve. I understand that was stated to Folsom High students maybe before we had all the direction we needed, and so we can't take that as that is what students were promised. But it's not a bad idea. Why don't we take that route? Why don't we hold students harmless with the grade that they had before distance learning started, and then allow students to improve from there? I think that if the concern is the choice, then let's err to that side, not to the side of no grades for anyone. So I think that would be my comments and hopes if this doesn't pass tonight, but I will be supporting this tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoover. I am going to reserve my comments right before a motion is made. I am very interested in hearing from the public.
President Clark, can I?
Oh, student board member. I totally forgot about you. You're still up. Welcome. Student board member Scarlett.
Thank you. Yeah, so to prepare for this meeting, I kind of reflected on my own past 4 years, and obviously not expecting this pandemic to happen whatsoever. So I didn't have a previous opinion formed on it, but to kind of think as a senior and both as a student, what is best for my classmates in my situation and the situations of my friends and of those people at other schools. So I contacted a bunch of sophomores, juniors, seniors from Folsom High, Vista Del Lago, Cordova High, as well as Mills and Mitchell, just to kind of get their input when what they were thinking, especially as 8th graders, and if they were put in this position. And I mean, pretty much everything that I got from the students has been echoed at this meeting. There's the side of students worried about college and if they're going to be put at a disadvantage, or really hoping that this semester would really help their GPA and kind of counting on that to go to the dream school that they've been waiting for and wishing for years. And to kind of just have the idea of that thrown away is really frustrating to them. And then there's the students who are going through unthinkable things, a lot of pressure, stress, staying at home, or even working crazy hours, and then just dealing with being at home and not being able to see their friends and kind of have a moment to relax. So I spoke with kids who are dealing with that stress and preferred, credit, no credit to kind of alleviate those circumstances. But I would say the majority of the students that I spoke to from all 3 schools did want to opt for the option. They would like the option for their friends who would benefit from having the grade ability, or themselves who would benefit from having credit, no credit. I'm going to be voting for the addendum today because I think that this option, again, like was said before, not everybody's going to be pleased, but by having this option, we can try to help both sides of the scale, I guess, and really think about how kids would benefit most. Like a parent was talking about scholarships. Well, there's the sports scholarships and the merit-based scholarships, and one of those 2 options would help one kid or really, really hurt another kid. So I think something that would be really important though is a lot of guidance for students who are undecided whether to, if we go with the option, whether to opt for having grades or for having credit, no credit. I think, for the kids who have straight A's, it might be an easy option, but for kids who have A's, B's, and maybe a C, they don't really know which way to go. Maybe sophomores or juniors who aren't really thinking about college yet probably don't know that having the grades or not having the grades would be more beneficial for their application. And then one last thing that I would like to include is, again, this isn't a desired situation for anybody or for especially the kids who are going through a lot right now, but in college applications, there's a spot where you can basically write an additional essay to all the circumstances that you were going through. So if the credit, no credit could have the unconscious bias of, oh, well, probably they weren't having the best grades, which is why they chose that option. They can explain what was going on. They can explain that they were working. They can explain that the stress going on in their families. So that's another thing that I think is important to consider. So again, I really think that having the option, although difficult and probably the best, in my opinion, of what we can do right now, I think it would be beneficial to most students in the sense that they can select rather than the students who are completely disadvantaged from one option than the other.
Thank you,
Mr. Clark?
Scarlett.
Mr.
Yes.
Clark, so can I wanted to ask two questions. Well, I want to make one statement and then ask a question. So if we want to look at what is in the best interest for all students, then it's the A for all, A for everyone. That across the board would be in the best interest for all of them. Are we treating this as a live meeting where we had public comment and now the board has deliberated and we're moving on? So what are we doing? I thought I heard you say you wanted to hear from the public again.
I noticed that there were a couple of hands raised, but in the interest of all this debate between the board members, I guess I'll just kind of close it out and make a final statement and entertain a motion. I want to thank Dr. Koligian and the rest of the staff and the FCEA for their work on this. And, I'm going to admit something. I was adamant about pushing the option for our students receiving a letter grade and, that choice and all that stuff. And, I was more concerned about, in that realm, I was more concerned about the students being competitive with their GPAs and their class rank. And, we as a district, I want to be consistent with the other districts. I really, really do. But you know what? We're different. We are a different district. And those who read our district vision, it states that we provide students with the educational tools to meet the technological demands and social skills to function in a culturally diverse society. And that's what we are as a district. We're diverse. I mean, during the past 5 days, the board has received numerous emails and calls. And Mr. E, while you were talking, I kind of jotted down the emails that I received, and there were 7 from Cordova and 1 student that called me and 1 student emailed me. Folsom, I had 8 emails with 1 student who texted me, and then Vista, I had 16. 1 student called and 1 student text. So I guess we're almost there, as far as hearing from everybody. But, we get the phone calls and the emails and the social media tags, and, it takes a lot, because I know what parents are doing. Their parents want to advocate for their kids. They want nothing more but what's best for their kids, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I've listened to the teachers who are aware of their student need, which they have concluded through months of connecting with them on deeper, more personal levels. And to me, honestly, this whole meeting, I get as Vista teachers versus the board members and you should recuse yourself, or parents slamming the teachers, or i.e. board members, about making these decisions. And for me, looking back at everything, I think for me personally, I failed to take into consideration who this ultimately would affect. I mean, it's going to affect the students, and it's not limited to Rancho Cordova, it's not limited to Vista, it's not limited to Folsom. I mean, it's limited, it's for everybody. And, we need to realize why we're here as a board. We need to realize we're here as admin, staff, principals, teachers, everybody. It's for the kids. I mean, this is a decision, all kids, that we need to make. I want to stand up for the kids and listen to those who don't have a strong platform to vocalize their opinions on the issues that are directly influencing them on their lives, no matter what they're going through. I heard a story from one student that said, my friend can't access a hotspot, and he goes to the library and sits outside the library, yes, on his cell phone, and he tries to use his Chromebook, and it's not working. So we as a board, we've got to strive to make the success of all of our students, not a selected few, all of them, every last one of them, the 21,000 of them. We got to make them successful. And, like talking about students, and, I was surprised to hear from a student that sent me a letter. And I wanted to take a little bit because to read this, it was a 5-page letter. And I'll be honest, it was a student from Vista. And that letter woke me. It really did. It made me more understandable of the situation. Like I said, I was just looking at, our kids are going to be competitive. They're going to raise their GPA and, all that stuff. I was so looking through the wrong lens and not looking at actually what this student wrote. And I'm going to quote her. She wrote, "My privilege is not only being that I come from a financially stable family, but I have access to technology, and most importantly, to the time I need to complete my assignments to the best of my ability. I recognize how my entitlement has awarded me with greater chance at what modern day society plasters as an academic success. This success should not be a representation of my grades. Rather, it should be characterized by my work ethic, my resilience, and my dedication to my assignments." In closing, she went on to say, "There are a string of benefits that follow certain types of students, such as myself, who opt for letter grades. However, decision at hand is not primarily up to me." That's from a student, from a Vista student. The same ones that we're talking about right now that feel that they need to have these, letter grades. This is what we're hearing. But like I said, that was my woke moment. This is about those who are sharing small screens with their siblings to attend their classes. This is about those who are too busy working tirelessly to make ends meet for their families while at the same time logging into Schoology every day. This is for those who need to prioritize their time into caring for their loved ones or themselves over filling out an array of notes. This is for those who are struggling day to day as they fall asleep every night, and I'll be real, sometimes on an empty stomach. This is for those who are emotionally disengaged at the fear of the lack of income making its way into their households due to this virus, which restricts them from focusing on anything besides money. How are they going to live? Who's going to pay their rent? This is for those who are deeply feeling the efforts of isolation and how it's taken a toll on their mental health. This is for those who are unable to obtain the proper resources to acquire an equitable education to that of their peers. You know, I want my colleagues to recognize those students I just spoke of and the hardships that they're facing. And I hope that we as a board are doing everything in our capacity to make requirements suitable for everybody. If it's straight A's, let's talk about it. I know Joanne at Miss Rankin made the comment about that. If we need to make it fair for everyone, we need to enable room for students to learn and grow. That's what we're here. That's why we meet and we discuss and we debate. It's all for our kids. But to me, accepting the pass or fail grading system, we are encouraging a large sense of collaboration and what these kids need right now, hope. So I will not accept the current proposal as written. That is my statement. I just think that what we need to do is, you know, take this back to negotiating team, have them negotiate something quickly. If need be, have another special board meeting. Hey, that's what we're here for. So that's where I am.
President Clark,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move that the board approve the addendum and request that the student board member Kisnick be able to cast the first vote.
I'll second.
It's been moved and
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Chris went out. Chris is frozen.
Come back, Chris, come back. Like at the right moment, you know, just for instance.
Learning could be like. It's not perfect. It's not the same standard of learning. People from the audience.
If we open up public comment again, we're opening up that door. We have to treat this like it's a regular meeting.
So I have a comment. I mean, I heard a lot, you know, tonight, and what the president said was, "It's a home run with me." I mean, it's the kids that don't have a voice, the ones that we see that are struggling, the ones that are invisible, just like the pandemic. Yeah, a lot of folks don't realize if you're an essential worker, and I'm experiencing, I see it out there. These are the hidden heroes every day that are taking a big hit, and they don't have the same privileges or entitlements that all the other kids do. These are the kids that don't speak up, are afraid to come forward. Their parents have language barriers. They have things that they are not able to come up and say and come to a board meeting or even do a virtual meeting. That's why you don't hear them in surveys. You don't hear them going. But what I heard tonight was an overwhelming support not to do grading. All the emails I got, almost 3/4 of them from teachers, parents, was really concerned about the grading option, that it was inequitable. And there's all kinds of different perspectives on that. I still see it as not equitable because just as simple as you're not in a classroom, you don't have that rapport with the teachers, the support, you don't have all the same grading concepts. If you go down to distance learning, and we're still learning how to do it efficiently across the board consistently, it's not the same. If we allow somebody to get grades under those conditions, they're going to be a more, I would say, not the same A as if you had the same A in the classroom. So it's basically not the same. It's deflated in a sense. But what are we really doing? It's not a perfect equation here. And if we're comparing ourselves like Elk Grove and other ones, like I said, they're apples and oranges. They have different needs, different people, different administrators. They might have had a light switch and already have distance learning running. We were down for a extent of time. And so that's why the governor's talking about starting in July, which is a whole nother equation. We have a lot bigger issues to solve here. We're still in the recovery phase. And we've got to have more faith, hope, and hope that we'll resolve these things, not just try to solve.
Excuse me, Mr. Short.
Yes.
We do have an issue to solve here. We have to get Mr. Clark back. Can we get him back on his phone if he has access to that?
Yes.
Ms. Rankins, he's coming in right now.
Okay.
I am back. I apologize.
Okay.
And actually, I was going to say acting President Short, but now we got the President Clark back. The only thing that I would point out, Mr. Short, is the fact that we had as the motion the approval of the grading system to be credit, no credit, or an option for a grade. If what came before us was an option for only credit, no credit, instead of the comments we heard tonight, we would be hearing the comments from all of the parents and the teachers that support the grading side. You can't look at the fact that the motion is what drove the comments, because the exact opposite MOU would have produced the exact opposite on the comments that who we would be hearing from tonight. My understanding, whether it's correct or not, my understanding is that teachers were uniformly divided 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 of the teachers felt that they could go either way, grading, credit, no credit. They were fine no matter what the decision was. 1/3 of the teachers were insistent on having credit, no credit only, and 1/3 of the teachers wanted to have a grading option. So this was far from a universal indication that credit, no credit has the support of the vast majority of the residents in Folsom and Rancho Cordova.
So, Mr. Reed, did you restate your motion?
Sure. My motion was that the board approve the addendum and request that student board member Kisnick cast the first vote.
And did Superintendent answer my question on the validity of student board members' vote?
It doesn't count in the final.
And I can reference, it's board bylaw 9150. And as much as we appreciate and acknowledge our student board members' feedback, the board bylaw says that the student board members may make motions that may be acted upon except on matters dealing with employee relations.
So even though it's an advisory vote, she cannot cast the first vote.
Well, she can. It just doesn't count. It's not counted in the count. Yeah.
That's all I'm asking for is that the student board member cast her advisory board or her advisory vote for the benefit of the board.
Okay, your motion is so taken. Was there a second?
A second.
It's been moved by Mr. Reed, second by Mr. Hoover. Superintendent?
Yes, Board Member Clark. I'm
No.
sorry,
No.
Board Member Niznik.
Hi.
Aye, okay. Board Member Clark,
No.
Board Member Short,
No.
Board Member Reed,
I vote yes, and to explain my vote, I'm voting in favor of all the students who had completed 9 weeks of grading.
Board Member Hoover,
Aye.
Board Member Rankin.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, with that being said,
I'll make a motion to go back to the table to negotiate and bargaining table as soon as possible. It sounds like it can be done. I hope they're able to understand that and come back with I think we had it originally in my mind.
Yeah, close.
Close. We already had an agreement a week ago. This has just been kind of prolonged with the option. But go back to what we were with, maybe exploring some of the things that Joanne and Mr. Clark brought up. But I think we'll be close to just credit, no credit with maybe the A, maybe explore that. But I would leave that up to the experts to come up with what would be best for our kids. So that's my motion.
If I could, go ahead.
I'll second, but go ahead, Mr.
If
Hoover.
I could interject, you know, I think, again, we're making this kind of faulty assumption that we only have two choices here. If we're already going to be going back to the bargaining table, if we really care about all students, because that's what everyone on this board has been talking about all night, we care about all students. If that is the case, let's find a solution that meets the needs of all students, because I guarantee you, if we bring back a credit no mark only resolution, our next board meeting is going to be just as long. It's going to have just as much dissent. It's going to have just as much public comment. It is going to be just as problematic as this boarding has long and difficult as this board meeting has been, because for all the people that their side was presented tonight, because of the MOU that was put forward, all of the people on the other side are going to be here if that MOU is put forward. So I would encourage our bargaining team and encourage this board to try to, let's consider a model where students can pick the grade that they left school with and stick with that grade. If you want to improve it, fine, but you're held harmless otherwise. I don't see why we don't consider that, given the fact it would meet the needs of everything that has been addressed tonight.
That's not my motion.
Well, I think we need to provide some guidance and just not leave absence of guidance to
Hold on.
staff.
Point of order, please, President.
Actually, board members are allowed to comment on a motion that's on the table.
Yeah,
So
I'll allow comment on the motion on the table.
I would like
point
to.
Of order, President, point of order.
Yes, sir.
It's a motion that, and you have to continue, the president is the chairman, not the other board members. Please take the motion, as we were talking about, credit, no credit, but exploring what Joanne said, maybe in A's, but let the experts come up with that decision of the negotiating. I think our experts can come up with it, but coming back with a great option is not the option. That's my motion.
All right. Well, and now board member Hoover's had an opportunity to chat. I would like to just raise a couple of points before we take a vote.
Point of order again, President.
I just want to make sure that we have a second on the table. I want to get this moved.
Right.
I did second it, but
okay.
in all fairness, Mr. Reed should be able to comment
absolutely
before we vote.
Mr. Reed.
All right. I think we need to ask the superintendent to get a legal opinion on the communication that Principal Caden had communicated to Folsom High students, and whether we have any potential liability for that communication, informing 2,400 students what their expectation is, and then taking that expectation back. So I think we need to know that before we take a final vote on whatever we're going to vote on. I think we also need to consider whether if we're going credit, no credit, whether we go credit, no credit for the entire year, for both the fall and the spring semester, because that would be equitable for Folsom High students and Rancho Cordova students, because Vista Del Lago, as I mentioned before, were able to obtain their credits in the fall for the same classes that Vista and Rancho Cordova, I'm sorry, that Folsom High and Rancho Cordova did not be able to get their full credit on. So I would like to throw that on the pile of things to consider. So credit, no credit, but for the entire year, not just the spring, the entire year. I would also be willing to entertain A for everyone, although I don't know how that's equitable, but I'll consider it, because how's that equitable for the students that really, bust their hump to do their best and maybe get their grades up from a C to an A or get up from a D to a B, and why they are punished for their hard work. But I'm open to consider A for everyone. And then the final thing I'd like to throw out there for consideration at the bargaining table, well, since we already know that it's inequitable between the schedule and the opportunities of Vista versus Folsom High and Cordova High, maybe we should entertain the concept that Vista Del Lago gets credit, no credit, and that the students at Folsom High and Cordova High who completed 9 weeks of grading before they went out get the option to have a grade if they so choose. We seem to allow the inequity between the high school models, so that inequity we might as well allow to carry over into how we award the credit, no credit to Vista Del Lago and the grading option to Cordova High and to Folsom High. Those are my observations.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Been moved by Mr. Short, second by Ms. Ranking. Superintendent.
Can I make a comment before you take the vote? Or do you want to take the vote and I can make the comment afterwards?
Let's make the comment afterwards.
Okay. All right. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Short.
Aye.
Board Member Reed.
Aye.
Board Member Hoover.
Once again, I'm not clear what we're voting on, and I feel like I have to keep asking this question. But Mr. Short has said that he wants to leave it to the experts, but then he's prescribed what he wants negotiated. I think that our job is to provide direction. Is the motion to just send it back to the bargaining table, or are we actually prescribing what they have to bargain? I think
the motion is sending it back to the bargaining table.
Yes.
And that's it.
Very much.
Yes, and we're coming back.
I think superintendent has good notes on what board comments were made in regards to what we would like to see discussed at the table.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Fine. I'm just trying to clarify what we're voting on right now.
We were close there before.
So the motion is simply to send it back to the bargaining table?
Yes.
Okay, then I support that.
Board Member Ranking.
Yes.
Student Member Nisnik.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
And can I add one comment, because I just feel like the comment about Principal Cadenhead needs to be clarified, and we did check with legal counsel, and I'm going to have Mr. Ogden state what legal said about the statement, and we don't have a legal issue here. But Mr. Ogden, go ahead.
Hi. It was a very difficult time before spring break. Mr. Cadenhead was trying to cheer up the students, and he did make a comment that said, if you're getting an A, you're going to get an A. That is what he said, and I think he said it in good faith. But he doesn't have the authority to do that. So when I did call legal counsel and discussed it today, one of the comments was, well, yeah, I agree with you, Don, he doesn't have the authority. But if, I asked legal counsel, how could someone say they were damaged by that statement? And they said they really couldn't see cause for damages. So they felt like, a principal speaking with good intentions, but without an authority. It's unfortunate, but I think his intentions were to make his kids feel safe over spring break.
Thank you.
Okay, good enough. Thank you, Mr. Ogden. Thank you, Dr. Collegian. We're not done yet, folks. We've got item 6B, approved memorandum of understanding with California School Employees Association, Chapter 528 CSEA, addressing the impacts and effects of COVID-19. Superintendent?
Yes, again, I want to start by thanking our leadership of CSEA and the hours and hours that they spent meeting with us as well and talking through the working conditions that are impacting our employees, especially some of the employees that were doing essential work on day one when our schools closed. So there were a lot of considerations, a lot of time, very conscientious thought that went into this MOU. So Mr. Ogden, do you want to highlight some of the priorities in this MOU, please?
I would. Thank you, Dr. Collegian. I'd like to start off with reading a letter from Rob Thomas. Rob Thomas is the president of CSEA. He's also the lead negotiator. He wrote, CSEA appreciates the district's commitment to the health, welfare, and safety of all of our staff. Over the next few months, we will face many changes in the way we serve our students, families, and each other. Your classified staff is committed to meet those challenges. Please keep us informed as we work together to conquer the new normal as it unfolds before us. Thanks, Rob.
I'd like to move that we approve the memorandum dated 3/17 and 3/18.
I'll second.
Now's the time.
Mr. Sharp.
Yeah, real quick. Any questions or comments from the public?
Mr. Clark, I have no public's participation
All right,
for this.
we'll go back to the motion. The motion was made by Mr. Reed, second by
Mr. Short.
Mr. Short. All right, Superintendent?
Yes, Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Short.
Aye.
Board Member Reed.
Aye.
Board Member Hoover.
Aye.
Board Member Ranking.
Aye.
Student Member Nisnik.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the MOU dated April 15th, 2020.
I'll second.
All right, moved by Mr. Reed, second by Ms. Ranking. Superintendent?
Yes. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Short.
Aye.
Board Member Reed.
Aye.
Board Member Hoover.
Aye.
Board Member Ranking.
Aye.
And Student Member Nisnik.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you so much. Looks like we're at the end of the line, folks. I will extend the quick, brief comment from our board before we adjourn. I'll start with Mr. Hoover.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long night. You know, I just have to share this because I'm disappointed in the board tonight, and I'm not disappointed because of the decision that they made. I'm disappointed because if this was the decision that we were going to make, we should have been voting on a different MOU tonight. And you know, and now we're going to have further delays because of this situation. And you know, when I gave feedback on the initial MOU, it was because I believed it was problematic. It wasn't because I wanted to continue the discussion. It's because I believed it was problematic. And I think that if, as a board, we should not have given this direction had we really believed we were going to vote this down. Because now, unfortunately, whatever we end up deciding, it just leaves parents and teachers waiting even longer. So, you know, I'm very disappointed in how this rolled out. I understand that teachers reached out for the last few. I've received and tried to respond to so many emails in the last few days. And I understand that, but we knew all those concerns when the idea was originally presented to us. So I'm really disappointed that we have further delays tonight. I would just encourage that, you know, the bargaining teams figure this out as soon as possible. And once again, I just want to emphasize, we do not have to pick between these two options. If we're going back to the bargaining table, let's pick something that works for everyone. Let's allow students to stick with the grade they had when they left school. There is, at the very least, it should be a part of the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Ms. Ranking.
I don't have too much to add outside of the fact that when all is said and done here, I think this process has been flawed. I don't know where we went amiss in this discussion, but it seems like the whole situation could have been handled better. I felt the board was should have been provided more information early on, but we can review that at a later date. But I just want to express my dissatisfaction with this process.
All right. Well, actually, I'll look at student board member Scarlett.
I do not have a comment tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. Board member Short.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. I would say there's always, and hindsight's always 50-50. We can always say that. Again, I was talking about we're under an emergency situation. We're going through, I believe, still a recovery state. So we got to give ourselves a little pat on the back that we're doing the best we can. Everybody as staff is doing a wonderful job of learning as we're going along. It's like building a bicycle while we're riding it. It's very difficult to do. So hindsight's easy. I mean, a week ago, I was on the same sentiments I am tonight. I want to make the record straight for Josh here that I mentioned that it was inequitable. I mentioned that we should listen to our teachers. We also should understand that we're under a COVID emergency, that we should be providing options. We had an agreement that was almost right there. So we could have been done a week ago, but again, part of the process, other jurisdictions, if you read CSBA material, they've been at it for months since it first started, thinking how it's going to happen when they get closure. They vetted it out. They had very robust communication protocols. We had all kinds of vetting process. We didn't have that opportunity. What's the first time we've done distance learning? Other jurisdictions had other resources that we may not have had in place at the time. So I think this staff and this administration did the best they can under the circumstances, and we should thank everyone for what they're doing under these conditions. And then I'm very proud of this district. I'm very proud of all our teachers. I'm proud of all our students under these circumstances. We're going to get through this, and it's not over, but we're going to get through this together, and we have to be strong. Like I said before, tough times don't last, but tough people do. We're a tough district. We're unique, and we're going to solve our problems as we go along. But this is something that we should still be thankful that we have a great district to get us through this. That's all I have.
Thank you. In closing, I'll just say my piece.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Reed? Yes.
Yeah. I was just going to say no comment.
Oh, it's getting late, man. I mean, hey, my bedtime was a half hour ago. No, anyway, in my closing, I mentioned before at the beginning of my statement that I was so adamant about the, sending this back and taking a look at it and adding the addendum and everything, and I'll own it. I will own it and say that, yeah, I take part responsibility for this delay, but I wanted to make sure that we had the right information and that we make the right decision. Now, I won't go as far as saying I'm disappointed in the board. I would never say I'm disappointed in you guys, because you guys do your research. You reach out to parents. You do what you need to do. We have healthy discussions. And that's what being on a governance team is all about. Hey, you may agree to disagree, but that's the way it is. So me using the word disappointed, I'm not going to do that, because that's almost like throwing my board members, my team, my governance team under the bus. Hey, we disagreed tonight. We have some credible arguments on both sides. It happens. Let's take this thing back. Let's find a viable solution and make this thing work on the behalf of who we are sitting in these seats to support. And those are our students. It's not self-serving. We're not serving ourselves. We don't have a hidden agenda. Well, at least I hope we don't have a hidden agenda. I hope we are here to serve the kids. And yeah, I want to tie on to a comment about maybe parents should be board members. Maybe they should be, but you've got 3 board members who genuinely care about their community, me being one of them. And I've said this story once, I'll say it again. When I go to open houses and they ask me, which kid is yours? It depends on what school I'm at. It may be all 640 of them. It may be all 2,200 of them, but they're my kids. And that's why I'm in the position that I'm in right now, because I care about my kids. So am I a parent in the district? No. I'm more like a step parent. I'm more like a guardian. I'm more like an advocate that's going to speak up for our kids that don't have a voice, and I touched on that. Maybe that's what we should be doing as a board, advocating a little bit more. With that, meeting adjourned.